Chapter 283. 10,000 feet above the sea of lava, the little black dragon was leisurely flying through the air. Flames were rising from the surface of the sea below, releasing waves of heat that filled the sky. The little black dragon was a frost serpent dragon and hated fire energy the most. As it flew through the waves of heat, its speed was greatly reduced. It had no choice but to release an icy aura to protect itself and Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was also sweating profusely from the heat, his face flushed red. When the little black dragon used its icy aura to envelop him, the invisible waves of heat were separated, and he felt much better. Unknowingly, 7 minutes passed. The little black dragon had flown 30 miles, but the sea of lava was still as vast as before. It was impossible to see the end. At this time, it was passing by a dark brown volcano that was 10,000 feet tall. Ji Tianqing tilted his head to observe the volcano, his expression turning grave. Thick smoke and wisps of flames were constantly rising from the mouth of the volcano. As he got closer, he could even hear the muffled rumbling coming from the mouth of the volcano. Halfway up the mountain, there were many cracks and holes from which crimson lava was constantly gushing out. The lava flowed along the walls of the volcano and into the sea of lava below. Could it be, this volcano is about to erupt? He tightly frowned, his heart filled with worry and anxiety. After all, the lava spewing out of the volcano when it erupted would be a world-destroying blow to him and the little black dragon. Little black dragon, increase your speed. Go a little faster. He patted the little black dragon's back and used his mind to urge it. The little black dragon immediately increased its speed, rushing forward with all its might. About a quarter of an hour later, it had flown more than 30 miles away and finally left the volcano behind. And at this time, that massive dark brown volcano finally erupted. Along with the deafening noises, dazzling flames suddenly spurted out from the crater of the volcano where the smoke was billowing. Within the flames was crimson lava, and around the flames was endless volcanic ash. In a flash, the entire volcano fiercely trembled, and the sea of lava within 50 miles began to churn. Dark red lava and volcanic ash soared into the sky like a mushroom cloud, covering the sky for dozens of miles. The sky above Ji Tianqing's head was covered by black ash, and the surrounding light also became gloomy. The power of a volcanic eruption is so terrifying. Don't tell me that we can't avoid it even though we're 30 miles away. He secretly clenched his fists, circulating his true essence at an extremely fast speed. A moment later, a scorching heat and shockwave came from behind him, instantly striking him and the little black dragon. Boom! There was a muffled thud as the little black dragon was sent tumbling through the air, almost knocked unconscious by the terrifying shockwave. It was severely injured on the spot, and its power was quickly fading away. It could not control its balance and could only be carried by the shock wave, falling into the magma sea ahead. An instant later, an incomparably scorching shockwave swept past it and Ji Tianqing, spreading even further away. The little black dragon, who had narrowly escaped death, endured the intense pain and injuries. He did his best to maintain his balance and prevent himself from falling. Ji Tianqing's clothes had already been charred by the scorching shockwave, and his internal organs had also been injured by the shock. But he clenched his teeth and silently placed his palms on the little black dragon's body, constantly pouring true essence into its body to help increase its strength. The little black dragon was still rapidly falling into the magma sea, getting closer and closer to the crimson surface. It struggled with all its might, doing its utmost to resist the force of the fall, wanting to fly back into the sky. It was only several hundred meters from the surface of the magma sea, about to plunge into it in the next moment. At this moment, the speed at which it was falling finally slowed. 300 meters above the surface of the magma sea, it finally stopped its fall and twisted its body to fly back into the sky. The scorching air and the wisps of flame floating in the air immediately singed Ji Tianqing's hair. But very quickly, the little black dragon carried him into the sky, far away from the magma sea. The scorching pain in his body vanished, and he inwardly sighed in relief, withdrawing his palms that had been imbued with true essence. But when he raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a vast expanse of volcanic ash pouring down. Not only was this dark brown volcanic ash mixed with large amounts of rock and magma, it was also terrifyingly hot. Alas, the little black dragon was heavily injured and had almost exhausted all its strength. Even though it saw the volcanic ash falling from the sky, it was powerless to escape. It opened its mouth and let out a dragon roar brimming with grief, indignation, and unwillingness, a hint of despair flashing through its eyes. At this moment of life and death, Ji Tianqing immediately placed his palms on its back, once more pouring true essence into its body. The little black dragon's body trembled as it was replenished with true essence, and it suddenly accelerated to the front. The-ish. Just when the volcanic ash was about to smash into it, it flew away like a bolt of lightning, narrowly avoiding this calamity. When it escaped the range of the volcanic ash, its surroundings suddenly became much brighter. President Ji Tian heaved a sigh of relief. His tense nerves finally relaxed. He turned to look behind him and saw a sight that he would never forget for the rest of his life. The black ash and magma that blotted out the sky poured into the magma ocean, splashing up huge waves of magma that were hundreds of meters high. Boom boom boom. A deafening sound reverberated in the air above the sea. The world was turbid, and everything within a radius of 100 li was covered in black ash. Other than scarlet flames and magma, nothing else could be seen. 10 seconds later, the magma and rock all fell into the sea of lava. The surface of the sea fiercely churned, creating massive waves 1,000 feet tall and bursting with flames. Ji Tianqing couldn't help but sigh in amazement at this astonishing sight. However, although this earth-shattering scene was spectacular, it was also extremely dangerous and destructive. "Old Ji, let's get out of here." The little black dragon sent a telepathic message to him before accelerating forward. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing saw a dazzling flame fly out of the surging sea of lava behind him. Hua! This massive scarlet flame charged out of the sea of lava and lunged at the little black dragon like a bolt of lightning. Ji Tianqing froze for a moment, his eyes fixed on this scarlet flame in astonishment. "That's a lava giant?" He immediately saw that the crimson flame was a crimson giant that was 100 meters tall. This giant's body was condensed from dark red lava, and its appearance was extremely similar to a human's. It had 2 hands, 2 legs, a torso, and a head. Chapter 284. Before the flaming fists had even arrived, a blazing gust of wind blew at it. The little black dragon's body swayed from the violent gust of wind, and its flying speed also slowed down. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing once more extended his palms, pouring vast amounts of true essence energy into the little black dragon's body. The little black dragon immediately erupted with all its strength, flying forward with all its might. Whoosh! The flaming fists of the lava giant brushed past it at a distance of 2 meters, finally missing. The little black dragon had luckily escaped the lava giant's attack and was fleeing forward with all its might. The lava giant, however, could not fly. It drew an arc in the sky before quickly plummeting, smashing into the lava sea with a splash. Massive waves immediately surged up on the surface of the sea, sending sparks flying everywhere. In a few short breaths, the flame giant charged out of the sea, running across the surface of the sea with its 2 legs. Its 2 massive feet did not sink as they stepped on the surface of the lava sea. Its speed was even faster than the little black dragon's. Thump thump thump. The lava giant chased at top speed, quickly catching up to the little black dragon. It was running across the surface of the sea while the little black dragon was flying 10,000 feet in the air. The two were very far apart. The lava giant jumped several times, but it could only reach a height of 500 to 600 meters. It simply could not reach the little black dragon. But when it reached a height of 500 meters, it waved its hands and threw out 2 balls of boiling lava at the little black dragon. The little black dragon was alarmed and hurriedly twisted its body to dodge. Thud-ish. Thud-ish. The 2 massive balls of lava whistled past it, whistling through the air. The little black dragon was badly frightened. It hurriedly increased its speed, flying even higher into the sky. The lava giant relentlessly chased after it, throwing out 1 ball of lava after another. The little black dragon desperately fled, dodging left and right to avoid the attacks of the lava balls. It had expended an enormous amount of energy and was quickly exhausted. Its flying speed was also rapidly decreasing. At this moment, the lava giant threw out another 2 balls of lava. The little black dragon barely managed to dodge one, but it was unable to dodge the other. Boom! It was hit by the huge magma ball on the spot, and its entire body was wrapped in red magma as it fell into the magma ocean below. The extremely high temperature emitted by the crimson lava broke through its icy aura and roasted its dragon body to the point where it emitted black smoke. It was almost burnt to a crisp. The incomparable pain caused the little black dragon to wretchedly scream. It was already heavily injured, and now that it was suffering such intense pain, it was immediately provoked into a frenzy, and desperately struggled to break free. Shwa! It finally broke free from the magma and fell into the sea of magma. Just as it was about to fall into the sea of lava, it exhausted its last bit of strength and flew up into the sky. However, it did not fly very far before it fell from the sky and landed heavily on a pitch-black volcano. The little black dragon no longer had the strength to struggle. It lay motionless halfway up the mountain, unconscious. At the same time, Ji Tianqing was falling rapidly from mid-air towards the magma ocean below. When the little black dragon was hit by the magma ball, he was sent flying. Fortunately, he was not wrapped in the magma ball, so even if he was heavily injured, his life would not be in danger. Unfortunately, after flying several miles through the air, he would still fall into the magma ocean. He was only 300 meters above the magma ocean and would fall into it in the next moment. However, at this moment, an incomparably huge flaming palm appeared in front of him and caught him. It was the lava giant. He fell into the lava giant's hand, his body engulfed by the rising flames. The lava giant opened its mouth and immediately stuffed him into its mouth, swallowing him in one gulp. Ji Tianqing didn't even have the chance to struggle or resist before he was sent into the lava giant's throat and into its stomach. Bang! With a muffled thud, Ji Tianqing fell into a pool of red magma, his head spinning. The unparalleled heat and magma roasted his body, almost causing him to faint on the spot. However, the true essence in his body naturally erupted, forming a dark golden barrier of light that wrapped around him like an eggshell. It was precisely because of this true essence barrier that he had not been burned to ash by the magma. However, his true essence barrier could not last much longer. It was rapidly melting, becoming thinner and thinner. At this moment of life and death, his heart was filled with deep unwillingness and grief. Damn it! Am I going to die in the lava giant's stomach? He inwardly roared, an unparalleled will and desire to live bursting forth from the depths of his soul. His entire body lit up with a resplendent golden light. Whoosh! The golden sword embryo in his body flew out of his body and floated above his head. Buzz! Buzz buzz! The golden sword embryo fiercely trembled and buzzed. In the blink of an eye, it grew to over 2 meters long, transforming into a giant golden sword. The giant sword lit up with a resplendent golden light, forming an oval-shaped barrier that firmly protected Ji Tianqing. Furthermore, the giant sword released an invisible devouring power that swept in all directions. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The red magma and the flames floating in the air were all swept up by the invisible devouring power and surged toward the giant golden sword. Ji Tianqing raised his head to look at the giant golden sword. He saw that it was like a whirlpool, crazily devouring the magma and flames around it. He stood within the golden barrier and was not eroded by the magma and flames at all. However, he could clearly feel that after the giant golden sword devoured the magma and flames, its power was rapidly increasing. His body also faintly felt a burning sensation, like a warm stream of water flowing in his meridians, rapidly refining one acupoint after another. The sudden change stunned him for a moment. His eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. He had never imagined that his sword embryo would be so miraculous. Not only did it save his life at the critical moment of life and death, it could even devour magma and flames. After 2 breaths, he calmed down and looked around with keen eyes. He was in the lava giant's stomach. There was red magma and flames in all directions, and there were black reefs in some places. As the giant golden sword continued to devour the magma and flames, the magma in the surroundings started to churn and quickly disappeared. In a short span of time, the magma in the surroundings had decreased by more than half, revealing large patches of black reefs. The giant golden sword also underwent a slight change. Its size and length did not change, but the golden light faintly revealed a tinge of dark red. Ji Tianqing saw the changes in the sword embryo and his face was filled with joy. Chapter 285. That feeling was similar to the feeling he had for metal elemental true origin and power. He immediately understood that after the sword embryo swallowed the lava and flames, it was gradually merging with the power of fire. The burning sensation in his body was the power of fire that was rapidly tempering his acupuncture points. In a short period of time, 2 acupuncture points in his 4th sword vein were completely tempered by the power of fire. His ability had also quietly increased by 20%, and he was steadily advancing towards the 5th level of the mystic comprehending realm. Ji Tianqing still did not understand why the sword embryo had such a miraculous effect and change. But he knew that now was the best time to increase his ability. He quickly sat cross-legged in the golden shield and concentrated on circulating his energy to control the power of fire in his body to continue tempering his acupuncture points. 15 minutes later, the tempering of the 3rd acupuncture point was completed. 30 minutes later, the tempering of the 4th acupuncture point was completed. 1 hour later, the tempering of the 5th acupuncture point was completed. As time passed, Ji Tianqing's ability was rapidly increasing. The magma and flames in the magma giant's stomach were quickly devoured. Up, down, left, right, in all directions, not a single flame could be seen. Not even a drop of lava could be found. Its stomach was empty, and only a shell formed by a layer of black reefs was left. The lava and flames were swallowed up, causing the lava giant's power to rapidly decrease. Cracks continuously appeared on its body. It roared and howled crazily, rolling around in pain in the sea of lava. It did not understand what was happening, but it instinctively struggled and opened its mouth to swallow the lava to replenish its lost power. But all the lava it swallowed was swallowed up by Ji Tianqing's sword embryo. Soon, 6 hours had passed. The lava giant was still struggling in the sea of lava, swallowing a large amount of lava with all its might. But the speed at which it swallowed the lava was obviously much slower than the sword embryo. At this moment, its entire body had turned into black reefs. Without the lava and flames, it could no longer be called a lava giant. Its gigantic body was covered in dense cracks. The black reefs were quickly crumbling and falling into the magma ocean with a series of plopping sounds. 10 hours later, more than half of its body had crumbled, leaving only half of its body and half of its leg. 1 day later, its body had completely crumbled, turning into a pile of shattered black reefs that sank into the sea of lava. The lava giant had completely disappeared and no longer existed. A huge golden sword appeared in the sea of lava, releasing an invisible devouring power that continued to swallow the sea of lava and flames. The golden light from the huge sword formed a circular shield that protected Ji Tianqing firmly. Ji Tianqing maintained his cross-legged posture with his eyes closed. He was still cultivating to increase his ability. 2 days later, more than half of the vast sea of lava was swallowed. The sea of lava had also decreased by several hundred meters. 5 days later, the huge sword had devoured the entire sea of lava to lava. The surroundings had turned into a dark brown open space, with black reefs piled up like mountains everywhere. Even the scattered volcanoes had become deathly silent, turning into ice-cold black stone mountains. 5 days ago, this area was still a sea of fire, a world of lava and flames. Now, there was no longer any light in this area. It had become a pitch-black, gloomy, and cold world. The huge golden sword that was suspended in mid-air changed color. It had turned into a mixture of gold and red. Swoosh! The golden shield disappeared. The huge golden sword also shrunk into a small, golden-red sword. It flew back into Ji Tianqing's body and landed at the black hole in his dantian. Ji Tianqing sensed something. He ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. In just 5 days, his ability had increased from level 4 to level 5 of the mystic comprehending stage. Moreover, he had been using the power of fire to refine the 9 sword veins again. After the second refinement, the sword veins had become more resilient and powerful. It also gave him a deeper foundation and potential. He used his spiritual consciousness to look inside his body. He saw the sword embryo that was suspended in his dantian. It was faintly emitting a surging, scorching power of flames. Without a doubt, he had already obtained a second natal attribute and had successfully mastered the power of flames. He withdrew his spiritual consciousness from the sword embryo and revealed a gratified smile. Everyone only has one innate attribute. They cultivate one of the 5 elemental powers. Only those who have reached the heavenly origin realm can master the power of the 5 elements. My natal attribute is metal. Now that the sword embryo has devoured the lava, it has allowed me to master the power of flames at the mystic comprehending stage. This is a miracle. He muttered to himself and lowered his head to look at his left hand. In the center of his left palm, there was a scarlet flame imprint. He could clearly feel that his left hand had undergone a miraculous change. With a thought, he activated his true core power and gathered it on his left hand. Instantly, his entire left arm became as red as fire, as if it was formed from magma. He could not wait to test the power of his left hand. He stretched out his left arm and slapped forward. Scarlet flames shot out from his palm and turned into a gigantic flaming light pillar. It hit a volcano that was 10 miles away. Bang! With a deafening sound, the volcano, which was thousands of feet tall, was broken in half by the flaming light pillar. Half of the volcano collapsed and exploded, turning into rubble that scattered all over the sky. Ji Tianqing was stunned. He stared at the rubble and exclaimed in disbelief. Oh my God! How could it be so powerful? As soon as he finished speaking, the voice of the sword soul, burial of heaven, rang in his mind. Kid, you used up 30% of your true scarlet flame fire for this palm strike. If you try 2 more times and use up all your true red flame fire, you can slowly cultivate and accumulate. The voice of the burial of heaven was low and cold, but there was a hint of mockery in his tone. Ji Tianqing suddenly realized that the mutation of the sword embryo must have something to do with the burial of heaven. He quickly dispersed the power in his left hand and let his left arm return to normal. He communicated with the burial of heaven telepathically. Senior burial of heaven, thank you for your help and reminder. It was just a small matter. The burial of heaven said indifferently, the true red flame fire is sealed in your left hand. Its power is too strong and is not something you can control now. Only if you continue to improve your strength can you truly unleash the power of the true red flame fire. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, I understand. Then, the sword soul, burial of heaven, did not say anything else. Ji Tianqing suppressed the excitement and surprise in his heart. He looked around at the reefs and open space and began to look for the little black dragon. Chapter 286. Although the little black dragon managed to keep its life, its injuries were too severe. It would take a long time to recover. Ji Tianqing's heart sank as he looked at the black dragon's pitiful appearance, which was covered in scars. He infused 20% of his energy into the little black dragon and fed it a few healing pills before putting it into the 100 treasures brocade pouch to let it rest. Then, he awakened Qian Yu from the 100 treasures brocade pouch. Earlier in the Forest of Death, Qian Yu had suffered heavy injuries and had a large amount of its lifespan devoured by the blue soul fire. After a few days of deep sleep and recuperation, its injuries had already recovered, and its fur had also regained its icy blue color. Whoosh! With a flash of light, Qian Yu flew out of the 100 treasures brocade pouch and appeared in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing jumped onto its back and said, "Qian Yu, keep going forward." Qian Yu flapped its wings and flew into the sky. As it flew forward, it observed its surroundings. The vast expanse of black land and black stone mountains were very strange. Its heart was filled with doubts. It could not help but ask Ji Tianqing where this place was and what had happened earlier. Ji Tianqing smiled faintly and briefly recounted the events that had transpired. An hour later, Qian Yu carried Ji Tianqing away from the vast sea of lava and entered a majestic mountain range. The mountain wall on the side of the sea of magma was completely barren, showing a scorched black color. On the other side of the mountain range, there was a lush primitive forest full of towering trees and exotic flowers. Qian Yu flew for more than 200 miles, crossed the vast primitive forest, and entered another region. At this time, it was flying above a surging river. The river, which was hundreds of meters wide, was located between two black mountain ranges. The river water was turbulent and flowed to an unknown direction. On both sides of the river were steep cliffs. The cliffs were as black as ink, and there were many dark caves. Qian Yu flew in the opposite direction of the river. Ji Tianqing looked at the cliffs on both sides, curious about the numerous caves. According to the markings on the map, the Thousand Crow Mountain is just past the Sea of Fire. There is a large river in the 10,000 Crow Mountain. If I follow the river upstream and find the source of the river, I will be able to reach the Full Moon Lake. He secretly recalled the information marked on the map, and his heart was filled with anticipation. As long as he passed through the 10,000 Crow Mountain range, he would reach the destination and enter the Full Moon Lake. He prayed silently in his heart that the following journey would be smooth and wouldn't be as dangerous as the Forest of Death and the Sea of Flames. However, it seemed that his prayers had backfired. On the cliff to the left of the river, a large flock of black birds suddenly flew out from a dark cave, shooting over like arrows. The flock of black birds was like a large black cloud, bringing with it a fierce gust of wind. In the blink of an eye, they had reached Qian Yu. Ji Tianqing could see clearly that the black birds were 1 meter long. Their bodies were as black as ink, and their feathers were hard and neat. They had sharp beaks and sharp claws. These black birds looked like crows, but they were several times larger than normal crows. Their strength and attack were also much stronger. He immediately recognized that these black birds were the middle-ranked demonic beasts, the reverse-boned black crows. A reverse-boned black crow's strength was only equivalent to a LV4 or 5 true element realm martial artist. It was no threat to him and Qian Yu. However, hundreds of reverse-boned black crows attacked together. Their attack and power were terrifying, and they couldn't help but be wary. Oh no! It's the reverse-boned black crows. Qian Yu, be careful. Ji Tianqing's face immediately turned cold, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Without hesitation, he activated 3 sword rays and slashed at the flock of reverse-boned black crows. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 sword rays immediately split into 9, and the sky was filled with sword rays. Within 5 breaths of time, the 3 sword rays had stabbed thousands of times. With the sound of the sword rays piercing through the air, the black cloud formed by the reverse-boned black crows was immediately enveloped by the sword rays. At least hundreds of reverse-boned black crows were killed on the spot by the sharp sword rays, and were chopped into pieces. The broken bodies of the black crows splattered black blood all over the sky and sprinkled down into the river below. Qian Yu was already prepared. He opened his mouth and spat out a dozen icy blue light blades, which shot at the flock of crows like sharp arrows. Immediately, a dozen reverse-boned black crows were killed, and their bodies fell from the sky into the river below. In the blink of an eye, the flock of black crows were all killed, leaving only a pile of black feathers floating in the air. "Ha, a flock of disgusting stinky crows, how dare you attack us? You're courting death." Qian Yu sneered proudly and continued to fly forward. Ji Tianqing's expression was not relaxed at all. His eyes became more and more serious. "Qian Yu, don't be careless. We've just killed more than 100 reverse-boned black crows. The smell of blood and the killing will definitely attract more black crows to attack us." Sure enough, as soon as his voice fell, on the cliffs on both sides of the river, for the black clouds immediately rushed out of the cave. There were 100 or 200 reverse-boned black crows in each of the black clouds. Like arrows released from a bow, they shot toward Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu, opening their mouths and letting out ear-piercing screeches. Caw! 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 One after another, the strange screeches immediately joined together, echoing between the two cliffs. Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu heard the ear-piercing screeches and felt dizzy. Their vision was a little blurry, and their heads were splitting. Taking advantage of this opportunity, hundreds of reverse-boned black crows rushed over from all directions, stretching out their sharp beaks and sharp claws, and attacked Qian Yu and Ji Tianqing from all sides. Qian Yu hurriedly flapped his wings and sped forward, trying to get rid of the flock of crows. In order to break out of the encirclement, he desperately waved his front claws, shooting out icy blue light all over the sky, and launched a counterattack. At the same time, it immediately reminded Ji Tianqing, "Old Ji." The cries of these reverse-boned black crows are very strange, and they can release a special sound wave attack. Ji Tianqing also realized this, so he immediately used his right hand's index and middle fingers to hit 4 acupoints on his body with bang 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 sounds. After the 4 acupoints were sealed, his hearing was temporarily sealed. He was like a deaf person, unable to hear anything. The strange cries of the hundreds of black crows and the formless soundwave attack were no longer a threat to him. He immediately activated several golden red sword auras, which danced and shuttled back and forth in the surroundings, desperately trying to kill those reverse-boned black crows. Swish! Swish! The area within a radius of 10 meters was immediately covered by the golden red sword shadows. All the black crows that rushed into the sword light were cut into pieces by the sword light, turning into countless pieces that fell from the sky. Chapter 287. Tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows covered the sky like a large black cloud. Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu's silhouettes were submerged in the sea of crows as they were besieged by countless black crows. Although they fought back desperately and tried their best to block the attacks of the crows, they could not stop them at all. Qian Yu was bigger and became the main target of the crows. In a short time, he was bitten by the sharp beaks and claws of the crows. His body was covered in blood and his ice-blue feathers kept falling off. Ah ah! Damn you stinky crows! How dare you peck my feathers? Get out of my way! Qian Yu roared angrily and waved his claws to attack the crows in front of him. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! Rays of ice-blue brilliance pierced through countless black crows like arrows and tore them to pieces. However, compared to the flock of crows that blotted out the sky, its attack was like a drop in the bucket. It was insignificant. The number of black crows that came from all directions did not decrease. Instead, there were more and more of them. Many black crows were killed and torn to shreds, turning into filthy blood and minced meat that filled the sky, falling down from the sky. Many reverse-boned black crows fought for food. They opened their sharp beaks and devoured the flesh of their own kind. Under the stimulation of blood and death, the crows became more and more violent and bloodthirsty. They attacked Ji Tianqing and Qianyu even more desperately. Qianyu screamed as he was pecked by the crows. Ji Tianqing was also a little embarrassed and his face was solemn. Seeing that the crows were getting denser and denser, more and more crows were rushing out of the caves on both sides of the cliff. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought to himself, ants can kill an elephant with so many reverse-boned black crows. They will tear me and Qianyu to pieces soon. This can't go on. I have to find a way to get rid of the crows. He made up his mind and slowly raised his left hand. He gathered his power in his left hand. Instantly, his entire left arm became as red as fire, like a magma arm. Red flames also surged in the center of his left palm. Damn crows, go to hell. He suddenly raised his left palm and slammed it forward. A giant flaming palm formed from crimson flames appeared in front of him out of nowhere and slammed towards the flock of black crows. This giant flaming palm was at least 20 meters wide and 30 meters long. It was terrifyingly huge. Boom! At that moment, at least several hundred reverse-boned black crows were struck by the giant flaming palm on the spot, exploding in the fierce crimson fire and turning into black charcoal. A gap was immediately blasted open in the black clouds that covered the sky. Hundreds of pieces of black charcoal fell like dumplings and crashed into the surging river. Ji Tianqing killed hundreds of black crows with a single palm strike, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of excitement. He waved his left palm again, controlling the giant flaming palm and sweeping it towards the crows beside him. The giant crimson flaming palm spewed out crimson flames that blotted out the sky and covered an area of 100 meters. Instantly, another few hundred reverse-boned black crows were killed on the spot. They turned into pieces of charcoal and fell into the river with a plop. When Qianyu saw this scene, his eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. While releasing icy light blades to kill the crows, he asked Ji Tianqing telepathically, "Old Ji, you can actually control the power of fire? Oh my god, when did you control fire?" Previously, Ji Tianqing had briefly told him about the magma ocean, but he didn't mention that he could control the power of fire after swallowing the magma ocean. Ji Tianqing smiled silently and didn't explain anything. He continued to wave his left hand and slammed it towards the crows in all directions. Boom boom boom. The giant flaming palm flew up and down, shooting out flames that blotted out the sky and bombarding the reverse-boned black crows. In the short span of 100 breaths, tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows were killed by the giant flaming palm and turned into charcoal that fell into the river. Plop 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 sounds were endless as the number of black crows in the sky rapidly decreased. After a quarter of an hour, the sky finally cleared up. All the crows had been killed by Ji Tianqing. In the caves on both sides of the cliff, there were still flocks of black crows circling around the cave entrance, making ear-piercing and unpleasant sounds. However, they could only circle around the cave entrance and look at Qianyu and Ji Tianqing from afar, not daring to attack anymore. Qianyu and Ji Tianqing were out of danger and sped up to fly forward. The river in front of them turned a bend. The bend was very wide and the water flow was relatively slow. On both sides of the river, there were huge black stones standing tall. Qianyu flew over the bend in the river, his body surging with an icy blue brilliance, silently healing his injuries. At this moment, in the wide bend of the river below, a huge whirlpool suddenly appeared. The dark vortex spun at an extremely fast speed and was rapidly expanding, like a huge black abyss, looking both mysterious and terrifying. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and shouted in a deep voice, "Qianyu, watch out!" As soon as his voice fell, a huge black shadow emerged from the deep vortex and flew up to the sky as fast as lightning. Swoosh! When the huge black shadow broke the surface of the water and rushed out of the vortex, it brought up huge waves and water splashes, making a deafening sound. In just a moment, Ji Tianqing saw clearly that the huge black shadow was actually a huge snake that was hundreds of meters long. The giant snake's body was pitch black and covered with fine scales that flickered with a cold light. Its body was at least 400 meters long. The upper half of its body was standing in the air, and its tail was still hidden in the huge vortex. When Ji Tianqing saw its appearance, his pupils suddenly shrank and a touch of surprise flashed in his eyes. This was because the pitch-black snake actually had 9 heads. Each snake head was basically the same size, and they were all shining with a cold light. They opened their bloody mouths and kept spitting out their scarlet tongues. What demonic beast is this? Its body is so huge, and it has 9 heads. Could this be the legendary 9-headed snake? Ji Tianqing looked at the 9-headed snake seriously and secretly clenched his fists. His body was constantly accumulating vital core. Qian Yu also stopped in time and floated in the air, staring at the 9-headed snake carefully. The 9-headed snake stood upright on the surface of the river, and its 9 pairs of dark green eyes stared at Qian Yu and Ji Tianqing, revealing a cold and bloodthirsty look in its eyes. There was no doubt that this turbulent river was its territory. Just now, when Ji Tianqing was fighting with countless reverse-boned black crows, it was awakened from hiding at the bottom of the river. Qian Yu and the 9-headed snake were 200 meters apart, facing each other silently. No one attacked first, as if the air had frozen. Chapter 288. The 9-headed snake's 9 flat mouths opened and closed silently, revealing sharp, dark yellow fangs. Drops of dark green saliva dripped from the corners of its mouth and turned into green smoke in the air, quietly spreading. Its 9 pairs of gloomy and cold eyes stared at Qian Yu and Ji Tianqing, and its aura became colder and colder. It was not in a hurry to attack immediately. It had enough patience to wait for Qian Yu and Ji Tianqing to be poisoned, paralyzed, and festered. At that time, it would be able to effortlessly catch its prey and enjoy its dinner to its heart's content. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. He did not show it on his face, but he secretly accumulated a vast amount of vital core and suddenly launched an attack. Gale Thunder Strike! He shouted in a low voice, and 2 golden sword rays slashed at the Hydra from the left and right. The 2 golden sword rays were 2 meters long, and with a fierce and domineering power, they arrived in front of the Hydra in an instant. The 9-headed snake immediately reacted. It shrank its body and tilted its 9 heads in an attempt to dodge the sword light. However, its body was too big, and there were too many heads and necks. In the end, it could not dodge the attack. Kaboom! The dazzling golden light mixed with the violent wind and turned into a powerful golden thunderbolt, which fiercely hit one of the Hydra's necks. A deafening sound echoed between the cliffs on both sides. The golden thunderbolt exploded with a loud bang, exploding into golden fragments that filled the sky and scattered into the river. There was a long and narrow white mark on the Hydra's neck, and dozens of palm-sized snake scales were cut off. However, it was only slightly injured, and its flesh and bones were not damaged at all. Only a trace of blood seeped out of the wound. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's face immediately became gloomy, and his eyes became very serious. Qian Yu also widened his eyes anxiously, and hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing, "Old Ji. We are in big trouble now. This Hydra is a great demon of the origin core stage. Since we can't beat them, let's think of a way to escape." Its eyes rolled around as it racked its brains to think of a solution. The 9-headed serpent was enraged. It opened its bloody mouth and let out a deep roar, spewing out tens of balls of dark green venom towards Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing made a prompt decision and shouted, "Qian Yu! Retreat quickly. Let's go back to the 1,000-Crow Mountain." Qian Yu flapped his wings with all his might and retreated as fast as he could, narrowly avoiding the venom that filled the sky. It turned around and fled towards the 10,000-Crow Mountain as it asked anxiously, "Old Ji, are you crazy? It wasn't easy for us to escape from the 10,000 Crow Mountain. If we go back now, wouldn't that be suicide? One Hydra is enough of a headache for us. If we are besieged by those damn stinky crows later, both of us will be torn to pieces. Ji Tianqing said with a serious face, Qian Yu, I don't have time to explain so much. Just do as I say. If we want to kill this Hydra, this is the only way. Qian Yu obviously believed him and did not ask any more questions as it flew towards the 10,000 Crow Mountain with all its might. The Hydra twisted its huge body and chased after them at lightning speed. It also opened its mouth and spat out black water arrows at Qian Yu and Ji Tianqing. Qian Yu dodged with all its might, its body flashing left and right as it narrowly dodged the water arrows. Not long after, it carried Ji Tianqing back to the 10,000 Crow Mountain and returned to the place where they fought with the crows. There was not a single black crow in the sky as all the black crows had returned to the caves on the cliff. At this time, the Hydra was only a few dozen meters away from Qian Yu. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing used all his might to unleash the Flying Star Sword technique and a huge golden sword aura appeared. This sword aura was 3 meters long and contained a sharp sword will and power. Originally, he wanted to use the Crimson Dragon Flash as this sword aura was the maximum power that he could unleash. However, he then channeled the power in his left hand and his entire arm immediately turned crimson red like magma. When he used the Scarlet Flame True Fire, the 3-meter-long golden sword beam immediately expanded violently, growing to a full 10 meters long. The huge sword aura was covered in blazing flames as it emitted an extremely violent and domineering aura. Crimson Dragon Flash. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate any longer as he let out a low growl filled with murderous intent and directed the flaming sword aura towards the Hydra. At that moment, the crimson sword aura burst forth with monstrous flames and formed a lifelike crimson fire dragon shadow. This sword aura had become the real Crimson Dragon Flash and its power had reached an extremely terrifying level. Swoosh! In just an instant, the Crimson Dragon Flash had traveled a few dozen meters and landed heavily on one of the Hydra's necks. With a muffled bang, the Hydra's neck and head were engulfed in flames. Its thick and sturdy neck was actually severed on the spot by the Crimson Dragon Flash and fell into the surging river along with its head. The severed neck revealed eerie white bones as dark red blood gushed out like a torrential downpour in the sky. An extremely foul stench of blood immediately spread over the river. The Hydra's neck and head had been severed and it immediately roared in agony as it furiously swung its huge body towards Qian Yu. Qian Yu was already prepared as he hurriedly tried to escape and narrowly avoided the Hydra's attack. The Hydra was even more enraged as it thrashed wildly in the surging river. It twisted its huge snake tail and slapped out huge waves. Even the cliffs on the left and right were cracked by the enormous snake tail, causing countless huge rocks to fall out of them. The crows that were hiding in the cave were alerted. They smelled the thick stench of blood in the air and rushed out of the cave to attack the Hydra. Suddenly, dozens of black clouds flew out from all directions and covered the sky. Tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows circled around the Hydra as they let out ear-piercing screeches and pecked at its wounds. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing hurriedly told Qian Yu to use this opportunity to escape. Qian Yu immediately understood and turned into a streak of icy blue light as it flew upstream at top speed. In just 30 seconds, it and Ji Tianqing had escaped from the crow's encirclement and were finally out of danger. Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked behind him. He saw that the 9-headed snake was still thrashing violently in the river, constantly twisting and struggling. Around the 9-headed snake, there were at least tens of thousands of black crows, completely covering the sky above the river. Tens of thousands of black crows attacked and pecked at the Hydra as blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Chapter 289. The previously ferocious and menacing 9-headed snake was soon devoured by tens of thousands of reverse-boned black crows. There wasn't even a bit of flesh left on the white skeleton of the snake. The reverse-boned black crows were indeed bloodthirsty and ferocious. When the 9-headed snake's skeleton fell into the river, the crows that covered the sky gradually dispersed and returned to their caves on the cliff. Soon, Qian Yu carried Ji Tianqing across the wide bend of the river and disappeared above the river. After that, the rest of the journey was smooth and safe. No accidents happened. After about 4 hours, Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu finally arrived at the source of the river. A majestic mountain that was more than 4,000 meters tall stood at the end of the river. A few golden rays of the setting sun shone through the layers of fog in the sky and shone on the mountain, causing the mountain to be covered in a layer of faint golden light. It looked even more mysterious and majestic. There was a huge black hole at the foot of the mountain. The surging river water was gushing out of the black hole. Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu crossed the majestic mountain and continued to fly forward. He looked ahead with a burning gaze and a look of anticipation appeared on his face. This is great. We've finally left the Thousand Ravens mountain area and are about to enter the Full Moon Lake. He thought to himself, what is the Full Moon Lake like? How am I going to find clues about the heavenly star bead in the lake? Just as he was thinking, Qian Yu carried him across the majestic mountain. A huge wasteland appeared in front of them. The ground was dark yellow and gave off a barren and lonely aura. Ji Tianqing looked down from the sky and saw that the wasteland was covered in dark yellow sand. Many huge rocks were scattered around and there was almost no greenery or plants. Most of the huge rocks were buried by the yellow sand. The exposed parts were severely weathered and rough. As gusts of wind blew across the wasteland, the yellow sand on the ground was swept up into the sky. The huge rocks were also peeled off and scattered in the sand. Further away in the wasteland, huge gullies were formed on the ground. They were densely connected like a spider web. Even if the wind blew sand into the sky, it would not be able to fill up the crisscrossing ravines. This area was located between a desert and a wasteland. Not only was it dry, but it was also devoid of life. It only gave off an ancient aura. Ji Tianqing frowned when he saw the boundless wasteland. As he looked around, he muttered to himself in confusion, according to the markings on the map, this should be the Full Moon Lake. But there isn't even a drop of water here. How can there be a lake? His heart was filled with doubt and disbelief. He circled above the wasteland for an entire day, carefully observing the terrain around the wasteland. He even took out a map and compared it several times. In the end, he had no choice but to admit that this was indeed Full Moon Lake. However, for some unknown reason, the Full Moon Lake had disappeared or dried up, turning into a wasteland full of cracks. This result made Ji Tianqing's heart a little heavy, and he frowned. He had risked his life to pass through the forest of death, the sea of fire, and the Raven Mountain. He had gone through so much to reach this place. How could he give up so easily? Even if the Full Moon Lake had disappeared and turned into a vast wasteland, he would continue to investigate and find clues about the heavenly star bead. He rode Qian Yu and continued to fly in the wasteland. He checked the situation along the way, not letting go of any clues. When he entered the depths of the wasteland, the wind in the sky became more and more violent, rolling up the sand and dust on the ground and covering the sun. He and Qian Yu endured the sandstorms and hurricanes and persevered through the wasteland, looking for any clues that might exist. Time flew by. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed by quickly. In 3 days, Ji Tianqing and Qian Yu flew around the wasteland more than a dozen times, almost going to every corner of the wasteland. Qian Yu's strength had been exhausted. He could only shrink back to the size of a kitten and go back to sleep in the 100 treasures brocade pouch. Ji Tianqing trekked alone in the wasteland. He walked for an entire day and continued to search for clues. He braved the sandstorms and hurricanes and moved forward. His whole body was covered with sand and dust, almost turning him into a native. Even so, he was still unwilling to give up. There was still a glimmer of hope in his heart. Soon, the 4th day passed. Ji Tianqing still could not find any clues. The disappointment in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He could not help but wonder if there was a problem with the clues in the mysterious ancient book or the map of the hidden Fog Mountain range. After searching for 4 days without sleep and rest, he was almost exhausted. He was extremely tired and sleepy. That night, he found a small cave in the wasteland. He hid in the cave to avoid the sandstorm and recuperated to recover his strength. After a long night, at dawn, the raging hurricanes and sandstorms gradually stopped. The whistling of the wind outside the cave gradually disappeared. The sand that covered the sky also gradually dissipated. The sky gradually became clear and the wasteland quieted down. When dawn came, Ji Tianqing finished his cultivation. After a night of recuperation, he was full of energy again. Seeing that the sky outside the cave was bright and the sandstorm had stopped, he could not help but smile with relief. Great, the sandstorm that lasted for a few days and nights has finally stopped. He quickly walked out of the cave and prepared to continue his journey and search for clues. However, when he walked to the entrance of the cave, he suddenly showed a surprised expression. The entrance of the cave was originally half buried by the sand. At that moment, the sand at the entrance of the cave had disappeared, revealing a large piece of dark brown rock. The sand outside the cave had sunk by more than 30 meters. Ji Tianqing leaped from the entrance of the cave. He drew an arc in the air and landed on the yellow sand below. He subconsciously turned around and looked at the entrance of the cave. He was stunned on the spot. He saw an ancient black stone statue that was dozens of meters tall standing in front of him. This black stone statue had experienced the vicissitudes of life for an unknown number of years. The surface had long been eroded by the wind and frost, and countless stone chips had been peeled off. The stone statue was mostly buried by the sand, and only the upper half of the statue was exposed. He could vaguely see that it was a strangely shaped and incomparably ferocious demon beast. Ji Tianqing stared at the stone statue for a long time and finally recognized the giant beast carved on the stone statue. It seemed to be the ancient legendary beast Lu Wu. The cave he rested in last night was actually the mouth of Lu Wu. It seems that this stone statue was previously buried in the sand and could not see the light of day. The raging sandstorm blew away the sand that buried the stone statue, revealing it. Chapter 290. Ji Tianqing circled Lu Wu several times and carefully examined it, but he could not find any clues. Thus, he climbed onto Lu Wu's body and began to examine it at close range. Mysterious patterns had been carved into the stone sculpture, but the stone sculpture had been severely weathered and its surface was covered in cracks. Ji Tianqing vaguely sensed that there was some mystery to this stone sculpture, and it seemed to contain the qi of a formation. But this was only his conjecture and could not be verified for the time being. He climbed onto Lu Wu's head and stood at the highest point to examine his surroundings. Suddenly, he caught sight of a black figure standing in the desert a dozen or so kilometers away. He focused his attention and observed for a moment. Then, he saw that the black figure seemed to be an ancient stone statue. There's actually more than one stone sculpture here. He muttered in a low voice, and a look of anticipation surged in his eyes. Soon after, Ji Tianqing left Lu Wu's stone sculpture and dashed through the yellow sand for more than 10 li before finally arriving at another black stone sculpture. This black stone sculpture had also been mostly buried by the sand, leaving only the upper half of its 50-some meters tall body exposed. The surface of the stone sculpture was mottled with age, covered in cracks and traces of weathering. Even some of the mysterious patterns and symbols were blurry and indistinct. Furthermore, this stone sculpture was also of an ancient beast. It was a ferocious-looking giant bird that was spreading its wings and soaring in the sky. Ji Tianqing could vaguely make out that this was a dragon hawk. Alas, a large chunk of the stone sculpture was damaged, and the beast was missing a head. After examining the dragon hawk for a while, he came to the same conclusion as before. The stone sculpture was too ancient and heavily weathered. Even if there were formation patterns and symbols on it, they could no longer be recognized. Ji Tianqing began to speculate. Was there some connection between this dragon hawk and the Lu Wu sculpture some li away? His brow furrowed in thought for a few moments, and then he began to examine the surrounding desert. Soon, he saw another black stone statue in the desert to the southwest, about a dozen kilometers away from him. There's actually a third stone sculpture. Ji Tianqing was a little surprised. He quickly jumped down from the back of the dragon hawk stone sculpture and rushed towards the southwest. A moment later, he arrived in front of the third stone statue. After close observation for a while, he recognized that this stone sculpture was also an ancient beast. It was the legendary three-legged golden crow. The situation of the golden crow statue was basically the same as the previous two statues. Not only was it mottled with age, it was also damaged. He stood on the head of the golden crow statue and looked around with his hand over his eyes. He quickly saw the figures of two more statues. One of them was in the northeast while the other was in the southwest. They were both more than 10 miles away from him. After observing them from a distance for a long time, he recognized that the two huge stone statues were carved with ancient beasts. He continued to observe his surroundings and soon saw several ancient beast statues. Between each stone sculpture, there was a distance of more than 10 miles, and they were all carved with a kind of ancient strange beast. Besides Lu Wu, the dragon eagle, and the three-legged golden crow, he also saw Chao Feng, Kuei ox, and Zhu Yan. In the end, he found a total of 12 ancient strange beast statues in a 50-mile radius of the desert. These strange beast statues were arranged according to a special pattern and position, forming a circle. He walked to the center of the desert and stood on a raised sand dune. He could clearly see the 12 stone sculptures of strange beasts around him. What was strange was that the sand dune under his feet was exactly 19 miles away from each of the stone sculptures. Ji Tianqing knew that this was no coincidence. Those 12 strange beast statues definitely contained the mysteries of some kind of formation. These strange beast statues are somewhat strange. They are very likely related to Full Moon Lake. They definitely wouldn't appear here for no reason. I have to study them carefully. Perhaps I can find clues about Full Moon Lake and the Heavenly Star Pearl from these strange beast statues. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and then walked down the sand dune. He was prepared to personally climb up each stone sculpture and carefully observe if there were any clues hidden in the stone sculptures. But at this moment, a few dark clouds suddenly appeared in the originally clear sky. The tranquil desert suddenly began to shake violently, as if a great earthquake had occurred. Amidst the muffled rumbling, a wide gully appeared on the ground. The desert within a radius of dozens of miles began to collapse. The strange thing was that only the area surrounded by the 12 strange beast statues was constantly collapsing and sinking. Outside of this place, the ground was still calm and the sky was still clear. Ji Tianqing's expression immediately changed. He tried his best to escape. He knew very well that such a strange and shocking upheaval must be related to those strange beast statues. However, just as he rushed down the sand dune, the desert under his feet collapsed with a bang, turning into endless yellow sand and sinking deep into the ground. A huge black hole appeared under his feet. It was like a bottomless abyss, swallowing the endless yellow sand. He was also unable to escape. Together with the yellow sand in the sky, he fell into the pitch-black abyss as if he was falling into hell. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly saw a faint light at the end of the abyss under his feet. As he fell rapidly and got closer to the light, he realized that it was a layer of pale silver light curtain. It was boundless and abnormally vast. In the next moment, he mixed with the yellow sand in the sky and charged into the pale silver light curtain. Buzz! The strong collision caused a loud buzzing sound to explode in his mind. He was shaken to the point that his consciousness blurred and he fainted. A moment later, he passed through the pale silver light curtain in his unconscious state and fell into a boundless void. The void was dark and cold. Only bits of starlight flickered in the distance. His falling speed kept decreasing until it finally came to a stop. He lightly landed in the void of space, hovering motionlessly in the air. There was clearly nothing below him, but it was as if there was a layer of invisible ground supporting him steadily. He was unconscious. He lay motionless in the void, quietly sleeping. It was as if he had become one with the boundless void. The void was incomparably quiet. Time passed silently. After an unknown period of time, perhaps 3 to 5 days, or perhaps 3 to 5 months, Ji Tianqing finally woke up. He slowly opened his eyes, rubbed his throbbing forehead, and sat up. He looked around and found that his surroundings were boundless darkness. There was nothing around him. In the vast void under his feet, thousands of silver light spots were densely distributed. Each light spot was a star. The thousands of stars were distributed according to a certain pattern, forming a mysterious and vast star map. Chapter 291. To the humankind, the boundless void and the densely packed stars were the most distant and mysterious existence. No matter what realm a cultivator was in, they could only observe the stars from afar. They could not enter the void and explore the mysteries of the stars. But now, Ji Tianqing had miraculously arrived in the void and saw the stars with his own eyes. Of course, he was full of excitement and awe. He felt like he was in a dream and it was unbelievable. However, after his excitement dissipated and he calmed down, he had to face a problem. How could he leave this void? How could he go back? Though the boundless void and the stars were magnificent, he could not stay here forever. Therefore, Ji Tianqing quickly calmed down. He frowned and thought about how to leave. He stared at the void and the stars beneath his feet and silently observed the mysterious map of stars. He wanted to find clues from it. When he focused on the map of stars, he could not help but be immersed in it. It was as if he was being sucked in by the map of stars. Time passed by quietly. He maintained his posture of careful observation and did not move an inch. After a long while, he finally regained his senses. Light flashed across his eyes and the corner of his lips curled up into a smile. I see. Who would have thought that these 36,000 stars would form a heavenly cycle star formation? The cosmic array was an array created by the humankind in the Tianxian land. It took a few generations of power and wisdom to create this array. The number and position of the stars in this array corresponded to the 36 Big Dipper stars. The arrangement and circulation path of every single star was traceable, and it contained the truth of the heaven Tao. It was not an overstatement to say that the cosmic array was one of the best treasures of the humankind. If the descendants of the humankind wanted to study and explore the mysteries of the stars, they would have to spend a lot of time studying the cosmic array. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had studied this array when he was studying arrays with Xiang Wuji in the Taiyan Palace. Xiang Wuji was also obsessed with the stellar map of the universe. He had studied it for decades and was very proficient in it. He had discovered Ji Tianqing's talent in the Tao of formations, so he had specially mentioned the heavenly cycle stellar diagram when he was imparting the Tao of formations to him. Ji Tianqing paced back and forth in the void as he stared at the stars in the sky. The heavenly cycle star diagram kept appearing in his mind as he tried to figure out a way to break it. He walked through space at a neither fast nor slow pace while his gaze grew clearer and deeper, and the imposing aura he emanated grew even more mysterious and formidable. 1 day, 2 days, 4 days passed quickly. Ji Tianqing seemed to know no tiredness. He walked in mysterious and complicated steps in the void without stopping for 4 days and 4 nights. On the 5th day, he finally stopped after taking 99,000 steps. At this moment, he was standing directly above a huge star. I've finally found it. The Juk star. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows as a confident smile appeared on his face. In these 4 days, he had taken 99,000 steps. He had been following the cosmic array's path to break the array and find the exit. Now, he had finally succeeded. He had found the Juk star, which was hidden among tens of thousands of stars. This star was huge and dazzling. It shone with a blinding silver light like the moon. However, only those who stood where Ji Tianqing was could notice its existence and see its light. This was one of the secrets of the cosmic array. The Juk star was also one of the exits of the array. This array was extraordinary. Many powerhouses could not understand it even after spending their entire lives trying. Ji Tianqing raised his head and looked forward. He extended his palms and waved them around in the dark void, drawing out a golden arc. His palms continued to emit vital energy into the void as if he was trying to open something. About an hour later, in the void 10 steps in front of him, a dazzling white light suddenly lit up. Whoosh! Dazzling white light instantly condensed into an oval-shaped teleportation portal, standing quietly in the void. Only then did Ji Tianqing retract his palms. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile as he walked towards the teleportation door that was flickering with white light. Whoosh! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianqing stepped into the portal and disappeared. In the next instant, he left the boundless starry sky and appeared in a dark hall out of thin air. The floor was made of wide, square, black stone slabs. Although there were patterns on the surface, they were covered with a thick layer of dust. The hall was empty and silent. The air was filled with the smell of decay as if it had not been used for countless years. The ceiling above his head was dotted with jewels, forming a vast pattern of stars. However, those gems were too old, and the power of many of them had already been exhausted, turning into dull ordinary stones. Only a dozen jewels were left. They were still emitting a faint light that dispelled the darkness. Ji Tianqing stood in the middle of the hall and looked around with an expressionless face. He thought to himself, where is this? Am I still in the hidden fog mountain range? With the help of the faint light emitted by the jewels, he observed the hall with his sharp eyes. On his left and right, about 10 meters away, there were 2 rows of huge stone pillars that supported the dome of the hall. Each stone pillar was as thick as a water tank. They were red in color and had many patterns drawn on them with golden lines. Ji Tianqing gently blew away the dust on the stone pillars and saw the patterns clearly. They depicted ancient beasts, such as the dragon eagle, Lu Wu, Zhu Yan, and Chao Feng. There were 6 stone pillars on each side of the hall. Each stone pillar had an ancient beast carved on it. The beast patterns on the 12 stone pillars corresponded to the beast carvings he had seen before. At this point, Ji Tianqing had an answer in his heart. Obviously, this hall was still in the hidden fog mountain range, in the full moon lake area. He lifted his foot and walked towards the north. After 100 steps, he stopped. In front of him were 9 levels of stone steps. At the top of the stone steps was a flat platform. On the platform was a huge throne with an aura as majestic as a mountain. The throne was cast from an unknown dark gold metal. It was 5 meters long and 3 meters wide. A circle of complicated patterns were carved on it. Although this throne was very old and covered in a thick layer of dust, it was dark and gloomy. However, its size and aura far surpassed any throne Ji Tianqing had ever seen. Whether it was the throne of an emperor in a mundane kingdom or the throne of the Sky Pillar sect master, none could compare to this dark gold throne. On the left side of the dark gold throne was a huge black stone tortoise. The stone tortoise was carved vividly and exuded a majestic aura. On its back was a 3-meter-tall stone tablet. A hint of surprise flashed through Ji Tianqing's eyes when he saw this. Chapter 292. According to the ancient saying, the dragon had 9 sons, all of them different. The divine dragon's 6th son was called Baitian, also known as Baxia. Its appearance was similar to a turtle, but it had a row of sharp teeth in its mouth that could swallow mountains and rivers. Legend had it that Wuxia was born with boundless strength and loved to carry heavy loads. It would often carry mountains and lakes on its back to stir up trouble, causing rivers to overturn and floods to fill the sky. In ancient times, a human god saw the suffering of the human race and took pity on them, so he subdued dragon son Wuxia. That ancient human god ordered Wuxia to dig up mountains and rivers, clean up the waterways, and control the floods. After countless years, the floods that ravaged the world were finally subdued, and the people were finally able to live in peace. That human god was worried that Wuxia would cause trouble again, so he prayed to the heavens and sent down a towering stone stele for Wuxia to carry on its back so that it could not move around freely. The stone stele recorded the story of the human god and Wuxia's achievements. It could reach the heavens and convey the will of the heavens. Of course, Ji Tianqing knew that this ancient legend was just a myth and might not be very trustworthy. However, in this ancient and majestic hall, he saw a dragon son Wuxia carrying a stone stele. Naturally, he would pay more attention and take a few more glances. He walked over the dust-covered steps and stood in front of Wuxia, observing the stone stele on its back at close range. Lines of ancient characters were indeed carved on the pitch-black stone stele. These characters were extremely strange. They looked like twisted symbols, but also like tadpoles pieced together. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment and realized that these ancient characters were not of the human race. He was puzzled as he pondered these characters when he suddenly saw a faint green light in Wuxia's eyes. An ancient and heavy voice suddenly sounded in his mind. 1,000 years. After 1,000 years, someone has finally come here. The voice was low and hoarse, full of emotion and lamentation. Ji Tianqing was immediately jolted awake. He looked at stone turtle Wuxia with shining eyes and asked, "Are you the one speaking?" Although he found it hard to understand, how could a stone tortoise without any signs of life speak? However, everything he had experienced in the hidden fog mountain range was so mysterious and unbelievable. This ancient hall also exuded a mysterious aura. Even if the stone tortoise spoke, he wouldn't be surprised. He was already used to it. The green light in the stone tortoise's eyes flickered, and the deep, hoarse voice rang out in his mind again. "Kid, you are the first person to enter the ancient star palace in the past 1,000 years. You are very lucky and very special." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly to the stone tortoise as a sign of respect. He knew that the stone tortoise was communicating with him through soul telepathy, so he asked, "Senior, may I ask who you are?" The stone turtle's eyes flickered as he replied via soul transmission, "Me? I'm just an old servant guarding the ancient star palace. Now, I'm just a wisp of my soul. Kid, since you can enter the ancient star palace, you are a fated person. My soul has been awakened by you, but it won't last for long. Soon, it will disappear from this world. I can see that you are full of questions. If you have anything to ask, ask as soon as possible. As long as I know, I will try my best to answer you." Ji Tianqing immediately cupped his fists and said with a sincere tone, "Thank you, Senior." "Senior, may I ask where this is? Is it in the full moon lake?" Stone turtle Wuxia said indifferently, "This is the ancient star palace, located at the bottom of the full moon lake. It is protected by the full moon lake and the massive heavenly cycle stellar formation. Only those who are fated can enter." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He could guess that the reason why he could enter this ancient palace was related to the disappearance of the full moon lake. He continued to ask, "Senior, who is the owner of this ancient star palace?" The stone tortoise said with a serious tone, "My master's title is the Bright Moon Demon Emperor. He is a famous elite in the Tian Xian continent, one of the 6 overlords of the demon clan. This ancient star palace is my master's temporary residence. Heavenly origin stage demons and demons could only be called demon kings and demon kings. Only those who had surpassed the heavenly origin stage and reached an even more powerful stage could be called emperor. Ji Tianqing was shocked that the owner of this ancient star palace, the bright moon demon emperor, had surpassed the heavenly origin stage. He asked again, "Senior, I came to the full moon lake after many difficulties to find the legendary heavenly star pearl. I obtained an ancient book, and it was recorded that the heavenly star pearl's aura had appeared in the full moon lake. I wonder where the heavenly star pearl is now." Stone Turtle Boss Ya was stunned and said with a serious tone, "Kid, this is a long story, so I'll make it short. My master, the bright moon demon emperor, did obtain the heavenly star pearl and kept it with him. He often thought of the magnificent Kenshin when he looked at it. However, not long after my master obtained the heavenly star pearl, a human elite broke into the ancient star palace and took the heavenly star pearl." Ji Tianqing was even more confused when he heard this. He asked instinctively, "Senior, what's the relationship between the bright moon demon emperor and Kenshin?" Stone Turtle Boss Ya's tone was complicated as he said, "My master was the overlord of the demon clan and a beautiful saintess. She met Kenshin in the western mainland and fell in love with Kenshin at first sight. That's why she followed him here. However, Kenshin was not an ordinary person. Why would he be reluctant to leave the secular world? My poor master was so infatuated, but in the end, she was lonely and lonely." Sigh. At this point, Stone Turtle Boss Ya sighed with emotion. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and remembered this story. He continued to ask, "Senior, who was the human elite who took the heavenly star pearl?" Stone Turtle Boss Ya answered, "That person called himself Emperor Yi. He was enlightened and taught by Kenshin and called himself Kenshin's successor. He was quite famous in the ancient star realm and left behind many legends." Emperor Yi. Kenshin's successor. Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and immediately thought of the ancient tomb at the foot of Dragon Mountain. He pondered for a moment and said solemnly, "Senior, not long ago, I found an ancient tomb at the foot of Dragon Mountain. That ancient tomb seems to be the tomb of the Kenshin successor, Emperor Yi. The ancient tomb is protected by a grand Tianyuan formation." He told Stone Turtle Boss Ya about the situation and information about the ancient tomb on Dragon Mountain. Stone Turtle Boss Ya was silent for a moment before he said with certainty, "Boy, if that ancient tomb is really Emperor Ye's tomb, then the heavenly star pearl must be in the ancient tomb. As for the ancient tomb's protective formation, the Grand Tianyuan formation from 1,000 years ago is indeed very mysterious and difficult to break for today's martial experts." Chapter 293. Ji Tianqing had come to the full moon lake after many hardships. He was full of anticipation for the heavenly star bead. However, he was told by Stone Turtle Boss Ya that the heavenly star bead was not in the starry hall. He was a little disappointed, and his mood was a little down. However, Stone Turtle Boss Ya told him that the heavenly star bead was most likely in the Dragon Mountain tomb. Moreover, it was willing to teach him the method to crack the Grand Heaven formation. To Ji Tianqing, this was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise that had turned the situation around. He immediately cupped his hands and bowed to the stone turtle. "Thank you for your help, Senior. I can't thank you enough." Stone Turtle Boss Ya did not reply, but the black stone tablet on its back lit up with a hazy white light. The white light was like a screen, and it immediately showed the image of the Grand Heaven formation. The formation in the image was majestic and very mysterious. Ji Tianqing was in awe of it. Soon, the image began to change, showing the structure and network of the Grand Heaven formation. It also showed the method to crack it. Ji Tianqing looked at the stone tablet attentively, immersing himself in the image of the formation, carefully observing and figuring it out. This is the Heaven Origin Array formation of the three talents. As time passed, the image in the white light screen kept changing, clearly and completely dissecting the mystery of the Grand Heaven formation. Ji Tianqing memorized the method to crack the formation, and every image was imprinted in his mind. Then, a new image appeared on the white light screen. It was a new Tianyuan formation. This is the Grand Heaven formation of the Four Symbols unification. Ji Tianqing immediately saw the clue. He stared at the light screen and studied it seriously. An hour later, the Grand Heaven formation of the Four Symbols unification was finished, and a new formation appeared in the white light screen. The 5 elements derivation, 6 directions stabilization, Big Dipper 7 stars, 8 extreme dragon lock, and other formations appeared in front of Ji Tianqing one by one. In the end, even the top secret formation of the 9 cauldrons universe appeared. Ji Tianqing was excited, and he found it unbelievable. Next, more Grand Heaven formation appeared in the white light screen, showing the method to crack the formation in detail. Ji Tianqing stared at the light screen and studied it carefully, forgetting the passage of time. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. More than 20 ways to crack the heaven origin array were displayed on the white light screen. Every Tianyuan formation was extremely profound and mysterious, and the way to break it was extremely complicated. Even with Ji Tianqing's talent in the Tao of arrays, it was impossible for him to memorize over 20 different methods to break the array. Finally, the white light screen disappeared, and the black stone tablet on the back of the stone tortoise dimmed. Stone Turtle Bashia's voice also sounded in Ji Tianqing's mind. Kid, the 24 types of Tianyuan formation I taught you include most of the Tianyuan grand formations on the continent. As long as you can comprehend all 24 types of formations and master them, you can become a Grand Master of formations. Any formation below the heavenly origin level won't be a problem for you. Ji Tianqing was very excited when he heard this. He was filled with anticipation and yearning to reach the great Grandmaster realm. He hurriedly said, "Thank you for teaching me, Senior." Emperor Ye's tomb under Dragon Mountain used 5 different formation methods: derivation of the 5 elements, stabilization of the 6 directions, 7 stars of the heavenly dipper, 8 dragon lock, and 9 cauldrons of the universe. After I comprehend the way to crack these 5 formations, I can activate the guardian formation of Emperor Ye's tomb. Stone Turtle Bashia said in a serious tone, "Kid, although your talent in the Tao of arrays is quite high, with your current strength, it's definitely difficult to crack the Tianyuan grand formation of Emperor Ye's tomb." Back then, the Burial of Heaven had also said this to Ji Tianqing. He immediately frowned and asked in return, "Senior, could it be that only by reaching the primal core realm can I crack that formation?" Stone Turtle Bashia was silent for a moment and said in a serious tone, "The primal core realm is just the beginning. You're only qualified to use the method to crack the formation. The success rate is not high. Moreover, the guardian formation of Emperor Ye's tomb uses 5 different Tianyuan grand formation methods. They are intertwined and fused together. It's very complicated and dangerous. Although I can't see the formation with my own eyes, I have to remind you that the 5 formations are superimposed and fused together. You must follow a specific order to crack them. If you make a mistake in the order of cracking the formation, you'll suffer a backlash from the formation and lose your life." Hearing how serious its tone was, Ji Tianqing understood that this matter had to be taken very seriously and could not be taken lightly. He definitely would not be able to fully grasp the method to crack the formation in a short period of time. He would have to wait patiently for a long time. He thought for a moment and asked somewhat unwillingly, "Senior, if I teach the method to break the formation to other experts and let them crack the Tianyuan grand formation, is it possible?" Stone Turtle Bashia said in a firm tone, "Of course not. Everyone's talent in the Tao of arrays is different, and their understanding of formations is also different. I've just taught you the 24 formations, but can you fully grasp them now? Obviously not. If you teach the method to break the formation to other experts, their understanding of the formation will definitely be different. When they try to crack the formation, there will definitely be a mistake. The formation guarding the tomb is a top Tianyuan grand formation. There is no room for error. Otherwise, the formation will self-destruct, and the person cracking the formation and the entire tomb will be reduced to ashes. Ji Tianqing did not dare to have any more fantasies after the stone turtle's explanation was so clear. He could only do his best to comprehend the method to crack the formation. When the time came, he would personally crack the formation of the Longshan tomb. At that moment, a hazy white light burst out from the stone turtle's eyes and drilled into Ji Tianqing's head like flowing water. Swoosh! He immediately felt an endless amount of information rushing into his head like a torrential flood. It made him dizzy. The stone turtle's voice also became weak. It warned solemnly, "Kid, this is the essence of the 24 formations. I'll implant it into your head. You have to calm down and comprehend it with all your might. Only then can you completely refine it. In a few days, or at most half a month, you'll truly comprehend the method to break the formation. You'll never forget it." As it spoke, its voice became fainter and fainter. In the end, it could not be heard at all. Clearly, Stone Turtle Bashia's remnant soul had disappeared from the world forever. Ji Tianqing stood in front of the stone tortoise and bowed with a sincere expression on his face. He silently expressed his gratitude. Then, he sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes. He channeled his energy to refine the vast amount of information in his head. Time passed silently, and the two hazy balls of white light in his mind continued to spread and merge into his soul. His entire body was vaguely covered in a hazy white light, making him look calm and mysterious. Unknowingly, 8 days had passed. Chapter 294. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianqing opened his eyes and stood up. At this moment, apart from being slightly weaker, he was already a Formation Dao Grandmaster. Any formation below the Heaven Origin grade would not be a problem for him. He had mastered the essence of the 24 Heaven Origin formations, which meant that he had mastered the core and origin of Formation Dao. Any formation below the Heaven Origin grade was an extension or branch of the 24 formations. As the saying went, no matter how many changes there were, they would remain the same. He had mastered the origin of Formation Dao, so it was easy for him to break any formation. He took a deep look at Stone Turtle Bashia before walking toward the back of the dark golden throne. There was a black stone door in the black palace wall behind the throne. The door frame was engraved with formation patterns and symbols. After passing through the black stone door, he would be able to leave the ancient Star Palace and return to the hidden Fog Mountain range. He only took a short 100 breaths to break the formation on the stone door. After the stone door opened, a transportation portal formed by white light appeared. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing stepped through the transportation portal and left the ancient Star Palace in a flash. He returned to the desert filled with yellow sand. The sky was filled with dense clouds, and a storm was blowing in the desert. It swept up sand and covered the sky. He stood on the sand dune and looked around. He noticed that the 12 mutated beast statues had long disappeared, and the abyss was no longer there. He was surrounded by the slowly rising and falling desert. There was nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if the 12 mutated beast statues had never appeared. His experience of falling into the starry sky and entering the ancient Star Palace was like a dream. I've already been delayed for almost a month. The Heaven Roll tournament is in a few days. I hope I can still make it. Ji Tianqing muttered softly before he turned around and left the sand dune. He walked through the storm and sand and walked toward the north with firm steps. 6 hours later, he finally walked out of the desert and left the Full Moon Lake area. Next, he followed the map's guidance and looked for the exit of the hidden Fog Mountain range. After leaving the Full Moon Lake, he passed through 2 dangerous areas and experienced several dangerous battles. He only walked out of the hidden Fog Mountain range a day later. He rode on Qian Yu and rushed back to the Sky Pillar sect. The distance from the hidden Fog Mountain range to the Sky Pillar sect was more than 1,500 kilometers. On the evening of the 3rd day, Ji Tianqing returned to the Sky Pillar sect covered in dust. He stood at the foot of the heaven-upholding peak and looked up at the towering mountain gate, his face filled with fatigue. On the inner court plaza at the peak of towering Sky Peak, more than 20 inner sect disciples were gathered in groups of 3 to 5, discussing in low voices. There was a young disciple who was as thin as a monkey and had a thin face. His eyes were bright and cunning, and he was surrounded by a few inner court disciples. This person was a famous person among the inner disciples. His nickname was Clairaudient, and he was famous for being well-informed. Squatting on a stone bench under the tree, he was telling some gossips and legends to his disciples. A tall young man listened for a while and asked, "Clairaudient, everyone says that you're well-informed. Then tell us, where did Ji Tianqing run off to? That kid hasn't appeared since the demon cave was destroyed. It's been a month, and the Heaven Roll Grand Tournament is starting tomorrow." When the other young disciples heard this, they immediately nodded in agreement, and all of them started to talk at once. "That's right. Clairaudient, tell us quickly. Is the kid like the rumors? Is he afraid of Senior Brother Bai's strength and has been hiding? If you ask me, the rumors are most likely true. With Ji Tianqing's strength at the second stage of the Mystic Comprehending stage, who can he defeat? Let alone Senior Brother Bai, even I, who's at the 6th stage of the Mystic Comprehending stage, can easily defeat Ji Tianqing. Do you believe me?" Clairaudient revealed a playful smile and gestured for everyone to keep quiet. When the few inner court disciples quietened down, he lowered his voice and said, "Actually, everyone knows about this. All the disciples are talking about it now. It's not just us inner court disciples. The outer court disciples are even more anxious. These few days, they've been talking about Ji Tianqing all day. I've also heard that even some deacons and elders are paying attention to this matter. They're very disappointed in Ji Tianqing." The few inner court disciples listened carefully and nodded in agreement. Clairaudient ear revealed a mocking sneer and continued, "I heard that 5 days ago, the sect leader sent people out to search for Ji Tianqing. He gave the order that Ji Tianqing must be found. It's a pity that we don't know where Ji Tianqing is hiding. 5 whole days have passed, and there's still no news of him. Everyone, you don't have to guess. Ji Tianqing must have run away because of fear. He must be hiding in some corner, trembling in fear." The disciples believed his words without a doubt, and they all sneered in disdain and ridicule. As expected, that kid has run away in the end. Tsk, a month ago, he issued a challenge in the square. How imposing and confident he was. I didn't expect him to reveal his true colors just a few days after he issued the challenge. That kid is as timid as a mouse. He actually ran away because of fear. What a disgrace. The honorable sect leader's personal disciple is actually so cowardly and incompetent. It's really an eye-opener. Alright, let's not talk about that good-for-nothing anymore. Let's talk about tomorrow's Heaven List tournament and guess the rankings of the few senior brothers. Thus, the few disciples changed the topic and talked about the Heaven List tournament. However, they had just chatted for a few sentences when they heard an incredulous exclamation from all around. Someone even shouted out Ji Tianqing's name involuntarily. The few disciples were stunned for a moment and hurriedly turned to look at the entrance of the square. He saw a young man with ragged clothes and unkempt hair walking toward him, looking travel-stained. Although he looked very miserable, as if he was a survivor who had crawled out of a mountain of swords and a sea of fire. However, his eyes were clear and deep, and his body faintly exuded a confident and powerful aura. The confidence and determination that came from the depths of his soul was like an invisible sharp sword, making many disciples in the square feel ashamed of their inferiority. The discussion in the square disappeared. Everyone stared at the young man in disbelief and their expressions became extremely complicated. After a while, when Ji Tianqing ignored the crowd and walked straight through the inner sect square, many disciples came to their senses. Ji Tianqing. It's him. Why is he back? Impossible. Did he run away because of fear? How could he come back now? Where has he been hiding for the past month? Why is he in such a miserable state, like a beggar? Ji Tianqing is back. I have to hurry and tell the others. There will be a good show tomorrow. Chapter 295. After Ji Tianqing left the square, he went straight back to Tianqing courtyard. The two servants and the maidservant, Xiao Shuang, who were guarding the courtyard, were cleaning the courtyard listlessly. They seemed to be in low spirits. Obviously, in the month that Ji Tianqing left the sect, there were many rumors and slanders in the sect. The servants and maidservant, Xiao Shuang, were also implicated and ridiculed by others. When Ji Tianqing stepped into the courtyard, the servants and maidservant, Xiao Shuang, were stunned when they saw him. When the three of them came back to their senses, they were immediately pleasantly surprised. They hurriedly came up to greet him. Senior brother Ji, you're finally back. That's great. Senior brother Ji, you're finally back. Senior brother Ji, I'll go boil some water for you and help you wash up. The three of them seemed to have found their backbone. They were in high spirits and straightened their backs. Ji Tianqing only nodded slightly at the three of them and went back to his room to take a bath and change his clothes. He sat in the room for a while, and maidservant, Xiao Shuang, brought in a wooden basin and hot water. Just as he finished washing his face, a servant disciple came in to report to him. Senior brother Ji, senior brother Bai is here to look for you. He's waiting outside the door. The servant disciple's tone was a little strange. He seemed to be angry with senior brother Bai, but he dared not say anything. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. He, I just came back. How did he get the news so quickly? He sneered in his heart. He stepped out of the room and came to the entrance of the courtyard. Bai Wuchen was waiting outside the door. He exuded an arrogant and cold aura, and there was a cold smile on his face. He looked at Ji Tianqing contemptuously and said in a strange tone, Junior brother Ji, you haven't shown up for a month. I thought you ran away because you didn't dare to come back. Junior brother Ji must have been hiding and running around in this month, right? Otherwise, why would you be in such a sorry state? Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and said coldly, it's just a duel with you. What's there to be afraid of? You don't have the qualifications to make me take you seriously. Bai Wuchen did not get angry. As if he did not hear Ji Yunshu's words, he sneered and said, Junior brother Ji, I'm surprised that you have the courage to come back. Don't worry, I won't let you lose too badly in front of all the disciples, deacons, and elders in the heaven-ranking competition tomorrow. Ji Tianqing looked at him as if he was looking at a fool. He revealed a look of pity and said indifferently, seeing that you are still so stupid, I am relieved. Bai Wuchen furrowed his brows. A cold light flashed in his eyes, but he quickly concealed it. He was furious, but he didn't want to show it. Ever since he had been angered to the point of vomiting blood by Qianyu, he had secretly made up his mind that no matter how angry he was, he would not let Ji Tianqing see him. Junior brother Ji, let's meet at the inner sanctum square tomorrow. Don't chicken out at the last minute. It's just a year of being a servant disciple. You will get used to it soon. Bai Wuchen sneered. After saying that, he turned and left Tianqing courtyard. Ji Tianqing ignored Bai Wuchen's mockery and returned to his room expressionlessly. After an hour, he finished washing up and changed into a new white robe. He had regained his handsome and heroic appearance. At this moment, a woman in a white dress with an otherworldly temperament arrived at the entrance of Tianqing courtyard. When the maid, Xiao Shuang, saw her, her face was filled with respect. She bowed and greeted her eldest senior sister. The woman in the white dress was Yunyao. Xiao Shuang led her through the courtyard and into the living room. When Ji Tianqing heard that Yunyao had arrived, he quickly walked into the living room and greeted her. Yunyao looked at him with a complicated expression before she said, "It's been a month since we last met. You're finally back. Everyone has been worried about you during this period of time. 5 days ago, Master even sent someone to look for you. Ji Tianqing sat down next to her and said apologetically, I'm sorry to have made everyone worried. Yun Yao continued to ask, I heard from the disciples that you were covered in dust when you came back. You were covered in wounds and looked a little disheveled. Did anything happen? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said calmly, I only went to settle some personal matters. Although it was a little dangerous, it was nothing serious. That's good. Yun Yao nodded and observed him for a moment. Suddenly, a hint of surprise flashed across her clear eyes. Junior brother Tianqing, you've reached the 5th stage of the mystic enlightening stage. Ji Tianqing's strength had increased. Moreover, his sword embryo had merged with the power of flame. His strength had become low profile and obscure. Ordinary mystic enlightening stage experts, such as Bai Wuqian, would not be able to see his strength level. Only a primal core expert like Yun Yao would be able to see through his strength. Ji Tianqing did not hide it. He nodded calmly and said, That's right. I haven't seen you for a month and you've advanced by 3 stages. It's simply unbelievable. Yun Yao's beautiful face was filled with astonishment. She could not help but exclaim. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a deep gaze. Her thoughts went back to a few months ago. She recalled the first time she met Ji Tianqing in Qingyun Nation. At that time, Ji Tianqing was still a trash at the 3rd level of the body refinement realm. He was extremely weak. However, in the short span of a month, he had reached the true energy realm and won 1st place in the tournament. The speed at which his strength increased was simply unimaginable. Thinking back to the past few months, Yun Yao realized that he had been rapidly growing and rising. He had also been creating miracles. The closer she got to Ji Tianqing and the more she understood him, the more she felt that she could not see through him. This feeling filled her heart with shock, gratification, and happiness. After a while, Yun Yao collected her thoughts and revealed a faint smile. She said to Ji Tianqing, since that's the case, have a good rest and prepare for tomorrow's Heaven List tournament. I'll go and report the news to Master now. Ji Tianqing stood up and cupped his hands. He smiled and said, then I'll have to trouble eldest senior sister. Help me report to Master that I'm safe. Yun Yao nodded and left. Ji Tianqing sent her out of the door and watched her figure disappear into the distance. Only then did he turn around and return to his room. After that, no one came to Tianqing's courtyard to disturb him. He had been on the move for a month and experienced all kinds of life and death dangers. He was already physically and mentally exhausted. After returning to his room, he laid on the bed in a relaxed manner. He closed his eyes to rest and conserve his energy. That night, undercurrents surged in the Sky Pillar sect. It was not calm. The news of Ji Tianqing's return to the Sky Pillar sect had already spread in the sect. Previously, countless disciples thought that he had escaped. They had all discussed and mocked him contemptuously. Many people felt that he would probably become the biggest laughing stock in the Tianshan region. However, no one expected that he would return the day before the Heaven List tournament. Countless disciples were filled with surprise and were filled with anticipation for tomorrow's Heaven List tournament. Chapter 296. The next morning. At dawn, more than 500 inner disciples rushed to the inner square at the peak of the mountain, full of excitement. Today was the day of the Heaven List tournament, the most sacred and solemn day in the Sky Pillar sect. There were only 30 spots on the Heaven List. Among the 100 inner disciples participating in the Heaven List tournament, only the top 30 could enter the Heaven List. The 30 inner disciples who could enter the Heaven List were the most outstanding geniuses of the Sky Pillar sect, including a few elite geniuses. The Heaven List tournament was very important. It was even related to the future and prosperity of the Sky Pillar sect. All the inner disciples would put down everything and rush to the square to watch the Heaven List tournament. Even the deacons, elders, and sect master Chu Tiansheng would personally come to watch. What's more, today's Heaven List tournament was not only the day for the inner disciples to challenge the rankings, but it was also the day for the battle between Ji Tianqing and Bai Wuqian. For nearly a month, countless disciples had been discussing and paying attention to this matter. Today, they could finally see the result. Would the sect master's disciple, Ji Tianqing, be defeated and endure the humiliation of being a servant disciple for a year? Or would the elite genius, Bai Wuqian, be defeated in public and abandon his previous glory and status to do manual labor like sweeping the ground and raising horses? Everyone was discussing animatedly, waiting to see what would happen. By the time the sun rose, more than 500 inner disciples had arrived. At this time, several elite geniuses also arrived one after another. Chen Su and Tang Yilua stood side by side in the square and whispered with smiles on their faces. Junior brother Tang, guess who between Ji Tianqing and Bai Wuqian will take off their white robes and become a servant? Senior brother Chen, is there any doubt? It's definitely Ji Tianqing. Yes, I think so too. Ji Tianqing's strength is too far from Bai Wuqian's. Even if he disappeared for a month, he might not be Bai Wuqian's opponent even if he went into seclusion for a few years. Later, the sect master and several elders will be present. I want to see how the sect master will react when Ji Tianqing is defeated and becomes a servant. Who dares to embarrass the sect master? When that happens, Ji Tianqing and Bai Wuqian will be in deep trouble. Beside the two of them stood a tall and sturdy young elite. It was Hao Meng. When he heard Chen Su and Tang Yilua's sneers, he instinctively frowned. Moreover, he had other thoughts in his mind and did not agree with Chen Su and Tang Yilua's words. Thinking back to a month ago when he and Ji Tianqing had joined forces to deal with the witch, Ji Tianqing had executed that sword strike, he was certain that Ji Tianqing was definitely not as simple as he seemed on the surface. He even had a premonition that something unexpected might happen in the Heaven Roll tournament later. At this moment, Bai Wuqian walked through the crowd and arrived at the square, standing beside Hao Meng. The gazes of the hundreds of inner sect disciples gathered on him in unison. Many disciples smiled and looked at him encouragingly. Some even cheered for him. Bai Wuqian ignored everyone's reaction and stood in the middle of the field with his eyes closed. He looked calm and confident. Seeing his reaction, Hao Meng could not help but frown. After a moment of hesitation, he reminded Bai Wuqian through his spiritual sense, "Senior brother Bai, don't underestimate Ji Tianqing. I have a feeling that he might have some trump card." Without waiting for Hao Meng to finish, Bai Wuqian opened his eyes and sneered. Junior brother Hao, you're taking him too seriously. If he has a trump card, do you think I don't have one too? He's just a poor boy from the mountains. So what if he's lucky? Today, I'll trample him under my feet and let him know who's the real God's favored one. Hao Meng choked on the second half of his sentence. He stared at Bai Wuqian with his big round eyes and did not say a word. At this moment, a young man in a white robe walked steadily toward the square under the rising sun. Many disciples stopped their discussion and turned to look at the young man in the white robe. Hao Meng, Bai Wuqian, Chen Su, and Tang Yilua also looked at him in unison, their eyes filled with complicated emotions. There was no doubt that the young man was Ji Tianqing. He ignored everyone's stares and walked to the center of the square. He stood beside the elite disciples. No matter what kind of strange gazes the hundreds of inner disciples cast at him, no matter what kind of ridicule or comments they made, he remained expressionless, neither sad nor happy. It was as if in his eyes, the hundreds of inner disciples were just weeds on the side of the road or ants in the soil. They were insignificant. Bai Wuqian's face darkened. He stared at Ji Tianqing with a sharp gaze, his whole body surging with coldness. Chen Su and Tang Yilua looked at him silently. They walked to his side and smiled at him. Tang Yilua asked with concern, "Junior brother Ji, I heard that you came back yesterday with disheveled hair and a dirty face. Are you injured?" Will it affect the competition? Chen Su also smiled and said with concern, Junior brother Ji, you're still young. Unlike junior brother Bai, who has been cultivating in the sect for many years. When the competition starts, don't try to be brave. You must act according to the situation. If the situation is critical, you must admit defeat. Tang Yilua nodded in agreement. He said earnestly, isn't it just a year of handyman? A real man must know when to yield and when to stand tall. Only then can you achieve great things. Anyway, you've only been in the sect for a few months. It's normal that you can't beat junior brother Bai. Everyone will understand and the sect master won't blame you. Ji Tianqing looked at the two of them with an indifferent expression and a cold smile flashed across his eyes. He was not familiar with the two and had not spoken more than 3 sentences to them. However, at this time, the two of them pretended to warn him, acting as if they were concerned about him. How could he not see the contempt and mockery hidden in the depths of their eyes under the smiles on their faces? Seeing that the two of them were about to say something, he said coldly, Senior brothers, you don't have to worry about me. Chen Su and Tang Yilua's faces stiffened. They smiled embarrassedly and returned to their seats. But in their hearts, they were cursing Ji Tianqing for not knowing what was good for him. After a while, all the elders and more than a dozen deacons came to the square one after another. On the east side of the square, several rows of spectator seats had already been set up. After the elders and deacons took their seats in the spectator seats, they greeted each other and talked for a while. Not long after, the sect master, Chu Tiansheng, also came to the square with Yun Yao. Everyone bowed to Chu Tiansheng with a solemn face. Chu Tiansheng nodded slightly and motioned for everyone to dispense with the formalities. He walked to the north of the square with majestic steps and sat down on the jade throne. Yun Yao, dressed in a white dress, stood quietly beside the throne like a fairy. Hundreds of disciples were secretly looking at Yun Yao with awe and admiration in their eyes. Yun Yao, on the other hand, had no one else in her eyes. She was looking for Ji Tianqing in the crowd. When she saw Ji Tianqing was also looking at her. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly and gave Ji Tianqing an encouraging look. Chapter 297. Chu Tiansheng also looked at Ji Tianqing. He could not help but stare at him a little longer. Ordinary disciples could not tell, but he could tell that Ji Tianqing's strength had reached level 5 mystic comprehending stage. Surprise and relief flashed in the depths of his eyes. His solemn expression turned indifferent. It was obvious that he was full of confidence in Ji Tianqing. Everyone had finally arrived. The Heaven List tournament was about to begin. Chu Tiansheng sat upright on his throne and looked down at the crowd. He said in a deep voice, Today, our sect will hold the annual Heaven List tournament. His voice was as loud as a bell, explaining the significance and importance of the Heaven List tournament in a dignified tone. After that, he said in a solemn tone, This year's Heaven List tournament will be hosted by Inner Elder Yi Hong as usual. Yi Hong immediately walked out of the crowd and saluted Chu Tiansheng. Yes, sect leader. Then, he stepped into the arena and announced loudly, I believe everyone already knows that today's Heaven List tournament will be different from the previous ones. Before the tournament begins, 2 disciples will have to follow the sect's rules and settle their personal grudges first. The sect's rules have always been that we will not interfere with the personal grudges between disciples. However, any conflict between disciples must be resolved according to the sect's rules. This time, I will supervise the duel with everyone present. Ji Tianqing, by Wuxia, according to your agreement, the loser will be a servant disciple for a year. If neither of you have any objections and no one forfeits, please step into the arena. As soon as Yi Hong finished speaking, Bai Wuqian took the lead and walked out of the crowd. He rushed into the arena in a flash. He looked at Ji Tianqing confidently and proudly. The corners of his mouth curled up into a disdainful sneer. Ji Tianqing ignored his provocation and walked into the arena expressionlessly. The two of them stood still in the arena, facing each other with a 10-meter gap between them. Bai Wuqian looked askance at Ji Tianqing and said in a mocking tone, "Junior brother Ji, it seems like you're ready to be a servant. Beg me. As long as you beg for mercy in front of everyone, I will let you lose in a decent manner." Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and asked coldly, "Bai Wuqian, how many moves do you think you can take from me?" His expression and tone did not have the slightest arrogance or provocation, as if he was asking a very serious question. Bai Wuqian's expression changed, and he shouted angrily, "Arrogant! I should be the one asking you that question." Ji Tianqing's face was as calm as ever. As if he was explaining the truth, he said slowly, "Bai Wuqian, if you can survive 3 moves from me, consider it my loss." Hearing this, Bai Wuqian was so angry that his face turned ashen. His eyes were burning with rage. "Ji Tianqing! You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. With your meager strength, you dare to boast so shamelessly." He couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing would actually say such arrogant words in front of everyone. He was simply too arrogant. This was the most blatant and direct humiliation. The elders and deacons in the audience were stunned when they heard Ji Tianqing's words. Some of them were stunned, thinking that they had misheard and that Ji Tianqing was too arrogant. Some of them looked at Ji Tianqing playfully, thinking that he must be bluffing to provoke Bai Wuqian. There were also people who had expectant looks in their eyes, waiting to enjoy this fierce battle. At this time, inner sect elder Yi Hong asked solemnly, "Ji Tianqing, do you mean what you said?" Ji Tianqing nodded expressionlessly. All of a sudden, the hundreds of inner disciples in the square were stunned. Their faces were filled with astonishment. The elders and deacons couldn't help but be moved. Their gazes toward Ji Tianqing became even more serious. The crowd could not believe that what he said was true. It was not a bluff. When had Bai Wuqian ever been humiliated in public? He was so angry that he was about to go crazy. His entire face had turned green, but he forcefully suppressed his anger so that he wouldn't lose his mind and lose his mind. "Good. Good. Ji Tianqing, you asked for it." He glared at Ji Tianqing, gritted his teeth, and growled, "I'd like to see how you're going to defeat me in 3 moves. At the same time, inner sect elder Yi Hong waved his hand and activated the defensive array of the arena. A khaki-colored shield with a radius of 100 meters enveloped the entire arena, isolating it from the square. Only Ji Tianqing and Bai Wuqian were in the arena. Even if they fought until the sun and moon dimmed, it would not affect the audience. Yi Hong's voice was like a great bell as he said, "I declare that the battle begins." As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Wuqian, who was on the verge of going berserk, pulled out his sword as fast as he could. He waved his sword and shot out 36 rays of dazzling sword radiance toward Ji Tianqing. This was Bai Wuqian's unique sword art, the celestial 36 swords. It was a black-level sword art. He unleashed all of his power. The sword radiance was so fast that it looked like lightning streaking across the sky. The area within a radius of 10 meters was instantly enveloped by the 36 rays of sword radiance, turning it into a death zone. Each ray of sword radiance was aimed at Ji Tianqing's vital points. They were all fatal moves. Upon seeing this, the hundreds of inner disciples could not help but stare with their eyes wide open, their hearts in their throats. Everyone wanted to know how Ji Tianqing was going to deal with this. Would he be able to dodge Bai Wuqian's fatal attack? No one expected Ji Tianqing to be so calm and expressionless in the face of such a powerful attack. Not only did he have no intention of retreating, he did not even take out his sword. He just raised his left hand. His aura was as heavy as a mountain. He unhurriedly slapped his palm toward Bai Wuqian. Seeing this, the crowd in the square was stunned. They could not believe their eyes. They did not know whether to laugh or cry, and they looked at Bai Wuqian with contempt. Is he going to fight senior brother Bai with his bare hands? He's not going to draw his sword. Isn't he too arrogant? Ji Tianqing is still pretending. He's really courting death. Humph. This guy is too arrogant. All kinds of thoughts flashed through the crowd's mind. However, only a few people noticed that Ji Tianqing's left arm and palm had turned red like fire, as if they were made of magma. As his palm struck out with the force of a mountain, the 100-meter-wide arena suddenly became as hot as fire. It was as if even the air was burning. 100 meters above the arena, a giant flaming palm suddenly appeared out of thin air. The giant flaming palm was 20 meters wide. It was formed by violent red flames. It fell from the sky like a meteor and slammed toward Bai Wuqian. At that moment, the entire square was illuminated by the flames. It was as if several suns had appeared in the sky. Hundreds of outer sect disciples could feel the unusual heat. They could not help but look up at the sky. When they saw the giant flaming palm descending from the sky, everyone's faces were filled with shock as they let out shocked cries. Bai Wuqian was also dumbfounded. He stared at the giant flaming palm with fear and despair in his eyes. He absolutely could not believe it. With Ji Tianqing's strength, how could he unleash such a terrifying attack? How could a martial artist in the mystic comprehending realm possess such an abnormal skill? Just as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the giant flaming palm from the sky engulfed his body. Boom! A deafening explosion that shook the heavens suddenly exploded in the square and immediately spread throughout the entire heaven-upholding peak. In that instant, the 100-meter arena was flooded with flames, and the defensive array was turned into a sea of flames. It was impossible to see anything clearly. Chapter 298. The earth-shattering sound reverberated in the square for a long time before it dissipated. Many cracks appeared on the ground of the plaza within a radius of a few hundred meters. Hundreds of inner disciples, deacons, and elders all stared at the arena with their eyes wide open. They did not even bat an eyelid. 10 breaths had passed, and the crowd still had not recovered from their shock. They still could not believe that the giant flaming palm that covered the sky was actually Ji Tianqing's. Very soon, the monstrous flames on the stage dissipated, and the dust in the air gradually settled down. Only then did the crowd see the situation in the arena clearly. They saw Ji Tianqing's figure. He was standing tall and straight in the arena with an indifferent expression. His robe was still as white as snow, spotless. The raging fire that covered a radius of 100 meters had no effect on him at all. At this moment, he was like a god that had walked out of the flames in the sky. He was aloof, cold, and majestic. Hundreds of inner disciples looked up at his back, their eyes filled with awe and respect. Not far in front of him, on the hard granite ground, there was a palm-shaped crater. Dense cracks extended around the crater like a spider web. Gravel was scattered on the ground, all of which had been blackened by the flames. The palm-shaped crater was more than 4 meters deep. At the bottom of the crater, there was a lump of black charcoal that was emitting black smoke. Upon closer inspection, one would find that the lump of black charcoal was actually in the shape of a human. It was Bai Wuqian. There were still a few strands of curly hair on his head that had not been completely burned. There were a few rags on his body, and he wore a layer of twisted soft armor. Not far from him, there was a bent broken sword. When he was hit by the giant flaming palm, it was as if he had been struck by lightning dozens of times. He was so badly injured that he was on the verge of death. He had been seriously injured and unconscious for a long time, but his body was still convulsing and twitching violently. When the elders and deacons in the audience saw Bai Wuqian lying in the crater, their expressions changed drastically. They were all horrified. A female elder wearing a purple robe immediately flew out of the spectator area and landed on the arena. She ignored the strange looks from the crowd and picked up Bai Wuqian, who was on the verge of death. She glanced coldly at Ji Tianqing and turned to leave the ring. All the disciples present recognized her. They knew that she was the fifth elder, Bai Wuqian's master. Although the fifth elder's actions were ungentlemanly, the crowd could understand his feelings after seeing Bai Wuqian's miserable fate. Fortunately, the person who injured Bai Wuqian was Ji Tianqing, the direct disciple of the sect leader. If it were any other disciple, the fifth elder would have already flown into a rage. Everyone's eyes fell on the fifth elder. They watched as she carried Bai Wuqian and left the square quickly. It wasn't until her figure was far away that the hundreds of disciples came back to their senses and began to discuss with lingering fear. Many disciples who had witnessed Bai Wuqian's miserable state could not help but gasp and cry out in disbelief. "Oh my God! Is this really something a Tongxian realm martial artist can do? Ji Tianqing is a freak. It's unbelievable. The power of Ji Tianqing's palm is comparable to that of a primal core realm martial artist. No wonder Ji Tianqing dares to be so arrogant. He boasted in front of everyone that he would defeat Bai Wuqian in 3 moves. That's right. Everyone was just mocking him for overestimating himself. I didn't expect him to beat Bai Wuqian so miserably with just 1 move. Ji Tianqing not only trampled Bai Wuqian under his feet, but he also slapped all of our faces. Who would have thought that he would be so freakish? It's not just us. All the elders and deacons must have misjudged him. Not only were the hundreds of disciples discussing, but the elders and deacons in the spectator area were also whispering to each other. Everyone's expressions were complicated. They looked at Ji Tianqing with shock and disbelief. Chu Tiansheng, who was sitting on the throne in the north of the square, was also surprised and pleasantly surprised. He knew that Ji Tianqing would be confident if he dared to boast in front of everyone. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would have such a shocking skill that he could defeat Bai Wuqian with just 1 slap. This was simply too much for him to bear. Hao Meng, who was among the crowd in the square, smiled bitterly and sighed softly. He. I guessed right. Ji Tianqing disappeared for a month. As expected, he has mastered an even more terrifying trump card. He's even more freakish than before. Senior brother Bai, I've warned you before. Why didn't you listen? Could it be that you've been blinded by jealousy and hatred? Can't you see the truth? Can't you see Ji Tianqing's talent and strength? Chen Su and Tang Yilua, who were next to Hao Meng, were also shocked. When the 2 of them saw the giant flaming palm descending from the sky and Bai Wuqian's charred body, their eyes widened and their jaws dropped. Only then did the 2 of them come to their senses. Their thumping hearts slowly calmed down. Both of them were shocked. They looked at each other and saw the fear and horror in each other's eyes. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that Ji Tianqing could defeat Bai Wuqian with just 1 slap. Both of them had the same thought at the same time. If I were to fight Ji Tianqing, would I be able to withstand the giant flaming palm descending from the sky? When they thought of this, the 2 of them had an answer in their hearts. They could not help but sigh silently. Their confidence and arrogance had collapsed. The duel that had caused a stir a month ago had finally come to an end. Everyone thought that it would be a fierce battle and that Ji Tianqing and Bai Wuqian would have to fight for a long time to determine the winner. But no one had expected the duel to end so quickly and with such a shocking result. Elder Yi Hong stepped into the arena and announced with a solemn face, I hereby announce that the duel between Ji Tianqing and Bai Wuqian has come to an end. Ji Tianqing wins. From now on, Ji Tianqing has taken Bai Wuqian's place on the heaven list and is now ranked 4th. The loser, Bai Wuqian, will be temporarily removed from his status as an inner disciple and demoted to a servant disciple for a year. As soon as he finished speaking, the hundreds of disciples in the square burst into another round of discussion. Yi Hong turned to look at Ji Tianqing and said calmly, Ji Tianqing, the duel is over. You may leave the arena and rest. However, Ji Tianqing did not leave. He cupped his fists at Yi Hong and said expressionlessly, Elder Yi, are we going to hold the Heaven List tournament next? Yi Hong was stunned. He did not understand what Su Mo wanted to do. He nodded subconsciously and said, "That's right." Ji Tianqing looked indifferent and said calmly, "In that case, I don't need to waste any more time." Chapter 299. Ji Tianqing's voice was not loud, but it could be heard clearly in the square. All of a sudden, the whispers and discussions in the square stopped abruptly. The hundreds of inner disciples all turned their heads to look at him, their faces full of shock and astonishment. The square was quiet for a moment, and then a louder discussion broke out. Challenging the third on the Heaven List. Ji Tianqing has just defeated Bai Wuqian and won the 4th place on the Heaven List. Is he still not satisfied? He wants to challenge the 3rd place on the Heaven List. The 3rd place is senior brother Tang Yiluo. Ji Tianqing said that he doesn't need to waste time. What does that mean? Is he in a hurry? Oh my God! The Heaven List tournament is so sacred and solemn. It's a big event for our sect. Does he have anything more important than the Heaven List tournament? This guy is too arrogant. You guys look at that indifferent look of his. Clearly, he doesn't take the Heaven Proclamation competition to heart. Ha! This is going to be a good show. I guess senior brother Tang Yilua didn't expect Ji Tianqing to suddenly challenge him, right? Hundreds of inner disciples were discussing excitedly, their eyes sparkling with excitement. Tang Yilua's face immediately darkened. He frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing in the arena. A hint of fear and hatred flashed in his eyes. Damn bastard! He must be holding a grudge. Otherwise, why would he be so eager to challenge me? Chen Su's face was unnatural. He nodded and said, before he went up to challenge Bai Wuqian, we kindly advised him. I didn't expect him to be so narrow-minded. However, junior brother Tang, he will challenge your ranking sooner or later. It's better to get rid of him now. Go ahead. Show him what you've got. Show him how extraordinary the 3rd place on the Heaven List is. Chen Su said casually and even cheered for Tang Yiluo. However, Tang Yiluo's face was dark and his heart was heavy. He glanced at Chen Su coldly and said in a playful tone, "Senior brother Chen, don't be so happy. You'd better pray sincerely that I win. Otherwise, if I fail, it will be your turn to suffer." Chen Su did not feel embarrassed even though his true thoughts were exposed. He said expressionlessly, "Then, junior brother Tang, you should be more careful." Tang Yilua ignored him and turned to walk towards the ring. Although he was wary of Ji Tianqing, he was afraid that he would end up like Bai Wuqian, who was turned into charcoal before he could use his ultimate skill. However, he was still an elite disciple ranked 3rd on the Heaven List, a top genius in the eyes of countless people. At such a critical moment, in front of everyone, he would not show the slightest bit of fear or apprehension. A genius should have the confidence and arrogance of a genius. Otherwise, what difference would there be between them and mediocrity? Under the gaze of countless people, Tang Yilua stepped onto the ring. His face was calm, and his body exuded a confident and calm aura. His eyes were fixed on Ji Tianqing. Junior brother Ji, you just had a great battle with Bai Wuqian. You should get off the stage and rest now. Why are you in such a hurry to challenge the rankings? In this way, even if I win, I'm afraid you'll think that I won with an unfair advantage, right? As he spoke, Tang Yilua showed a gentle smile, as if he really cared about Ji Tianqing. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was expressionless and silent, he continued, just now, your battle with junior brother Bai was a personal grudge. Even if you were injured, it's pardonable. However, this is the Heaven List tournament of our sect. We're brothers from the same sect. We've always been like brothers and sisters. Even if we're going to compete on the same stage and compete for the rankings, we can't hurt each other. Am I right, junior brother Ji? Ji Tianqing could not help but frown when he saw Tang Yilua's eloquence and righteousness. He asked in a deep voice, "What do you mean?" Tang Yilua smiled and said, "In order not to hurt each other, we only need to learn from each other. There's no need to fight with our lives on the line." Ji Tianqing sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Don't worry, I won't use the flaming giant palm on you. Don't be afraid." Tang Yilua was a little embarrassed by his straightforward words. However, Tang Yilua had achieved his goal by agreeing not to use the flaming giant palm. He was secretly pleased and sneered. "Ji Tianqing, oh Ji Tianqing, with your strength, if you didn't use that trump card, how could you defeat Bai Wuchen? Since you're so stupid to be fooled by me and promised not to use your trump card in public, I won't hold back." At the same time, Yi Hong announced in a dignified tone, "The Heaven List tournament officially begins. The first battle, Ji Tianqing, who is ranked 4th on the Heaven List, challenges Tang Yilua, who is ranked 3rd on the Heaven List." As soon as he finished speaking, the Heaven Roll tournament officially began. A golden light flashed in Tang Yilua's hand and a golden sword appeared. His whole body was bursting with a strong fighting spirit. "Junior brother Ji, take this." He shouted coldly and suddenly turned into a golden flowing light, rushing toward Ji Tianqing. Sword of the Wind Peak. At that moment, Tang Yilua burst out with all his strength and used his trump card in Sword Principle. He knew that Ji Tianqing's strength was not to be underestimated, so he didn't dare to let his guard down and used his most powerful trump card in the beginning. His body and the sword in his hand merged into one and turned into a 5-meter-long giant sword light, slashing toward Ji Tianqing. Swoosh! The sword light that could split heaven and earth was like the attack of the 9 heavens squall and the suppression of a lofty mountain. Its power was violent and its momentum was extremely powerful. In an instant, the arena was illuminated by the golden sword light and the air was filled with fierce sword essence. Ji Tianqing's aura was locked by the giant sword light and he was under heavy pressure. He was in danger. Hundreds of disciples in the square were full of exclamations of surprise, for Tang Yilua's amazing sword, they were shocked and admired. Everyone couldn't help but wonder how Ji Tianqing could block the sword light if he didn't use the giant flame palm. However, Ji Tianqing didn't move at all. He stood there motionlessly. When the sword light that could split heaven and earth came down, a sword in a black scabbard appeared in his hand. Clang! He finally unsheathed the sword. When the sword came out of the scabbard, it burst out with a crisp sound. Roar! A dragon's roar that shook the 9 heavens was heard and spread across the square and the mountain peak. Countless people were shocked and had goosebumps all over their bodies. The black dragon sword turned into a giant red sword light like a red flame dragon and slashed toward Tang Yilua with the power to destroy heaven and earth. The giant red flame dragon burst out a monstrous fire as if it was going to burn everything in the world. Boom! The 2 sword lights that could split heaven and earth collided fiercely in the air and burst out a loud noise that shook the sky. One was the sword of the Wind Peak, while the other was the sword of the red flame dragon. Both were amazing sword techniques. Tang Yilua and Ji Tianqing were also one of the top geniuses of the Sky Pillar sect. Chapter 300. Amidst an earth-shattering explosion, Feng Yu's sword instantly collapsed. The huge sword light exploded into countless pieces, wrapped in the violent strength qi, shooting in all directions. The arena became chaotic, filled with sword ray fragments and monstrous flames. The crimson flame divine dragon sword also exploded with a bang and turned into rolling waves of fire, causing the arena within a 100-meter radius to become a sea of fire. After a long time, the sky full of flames and violent wind finally dissipated. The arena returned to calm, and everyone saw the appearance of Ji Tianqing and Tang Yilua clearly. Ji Tianqing stood at the east side of the arena, completely unscathed. His clothes were snow-white, and his expression was indifferent. Tang Yilua stood at the west side of the arena, 100 steps away from him, and there was a palm-shaped pit between them. Half of his face was charred black, and there were wisps of black smoke coming out of his nose and mouth. The white robe he wore was also charred black by the monstrous flames, and his hair was charred black and curly as if he was struck by lightning. Fortunately, although he looked battered and exhausted, he only suffered some light injuries. He stared at Ji Tianqing with his eyes wide open, revealing a deep sense of disbelief, and shouted in a daze, "How is this possible? Feng Yu's sword strike is my strongest killing move, how could you possibly block it?" Although Tang Yilua's strength was only at the 8th level of the Tongxian stage, he was an elite genius with outstanding talent. Feng Yu's sword strike that he executed with all his strength was comparable to the attack of a first-level origin core martial artist. He originally thought that under the situation where Ji Tianqing did not use the flaming palm, he would undoubtedly win. But the result made him dumbfounded. Not only did Ji Tianqing block Feng Yu's sword strike, but he was also unscathed. How could this not make him inexplicably shocked? At this moment, Ji Tianqing held the black dragon sword in his hand and rushed towards Tang Yilua like a gust of wind, his entire body bursting with unparalleled battle intent. He stared coldly at Tang Yilua and shouted in a low voice, "Senior brother Tang, I'm going to use the second strike, you better take it." As his voice fell, he held the black dragon sword in his right hand, circulated his lifetime's cultivation, and fiercely slashed out with the sword. Shwa! The black dragon sword immediately lit up with a dazzling golden light, turning into a 5-meter-long golden sword that seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth. That huge sword emitted a golden light that overflowed into the sky like a huge golden dragon. It was holy, dazzling, domineering, and mighty to the extreme. Ji Tianqing's second sword was actually the golden dragon sword. The golden dragon sword slashed down like an aurora, and before Tang Yilua could react, it had already covered his body. Boom! With a dull thud, Tang Yilua was sent flying by the golden dragon greatsword. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. His body tumbled backward, drawing an arc in the air and falling 10 meters away. Plop! Tang Yilua heavily smashed into the ground, shaking the arena floor, splashing a large amount of dust and stone debris. After rolling a few times on the ground, he managed to dissipate the impact and came to a stop. He struggled to get up, but there was a piercing pain in his chest, and his whole body was numb and powerless. Cough, cough, he couldn't help but cough twice. Blood foam overflowed from his mouth and nose, and his eyes turned blood red. He wanted to circulate his true essence to suppress the injury of his internal organs, but he found that his internal organs had been displaced, and his true essence was in chaos. There was no doubt that he was seriously injured by the golden dragon sword. In a short time, he had lost his combat strength. At this moment, Ji Tianqing put away the black dragon sword and came to his side with an indifferent expression. Ji Tianqing looked at Tang Yilua condescendingly and said in a calm tone, "You just said that we're just comparing notes, and that will stop when the time comes. Then, is the battle between us over?" His tone was calm, and his expression was indifferent, without the slightest hint of arrogance or flaunting. But these two sentences were so harsh in Tang Yilua's ears. It made him feel ashamed and resentful, and he couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in. At this moment, Tang Yilua finally understood. His deliberate hypocrisy, arrogance, and disdain had been seen through by Ji Tianqing long ago. It was just that Ji Tianqing disdained to argue with him. A verbal battle was just child's play. Only an upright battle, with the most violent and domineering attack, to knock the opponent to the ground, was the most valiant and convincing method. Ji Tianqing did it. Tang Yilua unwillingly raised his head and glared at Ji Tianqing. He shouted in a hoarse voice, "Ji Tianqing. Not only do you have the power of fire, but you also control the power of metal. How is this possible? You're only at the Tongxian realm, how can you control two elements?" It was common knowledge in the martial arts world that only Sky Origin realm experts could control the power of the 5 elements. But Ji Tianqing was only at the Tongxian realm, and he actually controlled both the power of fire and metal. He was definitely a rare dual-element genius. Based on this point alone, he could surpass Tang Yilua and become one of the top 3 geniuses in the sky-bearing sect. Tang Yilua's defeat was absolutely justified. It was even natural for him to be defeated. The hundreds of inner disciples in the square were already dumbfounded. Their faces were filled with shock. The deacons and elders were also inexplicably shocked. Their eyes were shining brightly as they secretly discussed with each other. Even sect master Chu Tiansheng, who had always been as calm as Mount Tai, revealed a gratified smile. He looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of surprise and admiration. Obviously, he was very satisfied with this disciple of his. In just a quarter of an hour, Ji Tianqing had continuously surprised him several times. Ji Tianqing, oh Ji Tianqing, I really didn't misjudge you. You have also proved yourself in front of everyone. You are a genius who is different from ordinary people and can be compared with Yun Yao. Chu Tiansheng secretly sighed in his heart, and the gratified smile in his eyes was completely undisguised. In the arena, Tang Yilua struggled to get up. He had to support himself with his sword to stand firm. His white robe was soaked in blood, and his hair was disheveled. He looked very miserable. At this point, he no longer had the strength to fight, and it was also impossible for him to risk his life with Ji Tianqing. He was silent for a moment. He could only suppress the anger and humiliation in his heart and said in a low voice, "Junior brother Ji, I admit defeat." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and didn't say anything. The surging battle intent that surrounded his body gradually dissipated. Although it was a great honor for him to defeat Tang Yilua, who was ranked 3rd on the heaven list, in front of everyone, he was still calm and composed. His expression was calm, and there wasn't the slightest bit of excitement. It was as if to him, all of this was natural. Many disciples, deacons, and elders saw this and were even more shocked. A genius who could create miracles and defeat strong opponents wasn't scary. What was scary was that this person was incomparably calm. Even if he had a glorious battle record, he was neither arrogant nor impatient. No one could see any change in his emotions. Chapter 301. Tang Yilua was covered in blood as he staggered out of the arena. Just a moment ago, he was an elite genius who was admired by countless disciples. Yet at this very moment, he was in a miserable state. He had lost all his face and was too ashamed to stay on the square. He walked through the crowd with his head lowered and left the inner square silently. Many disciples looked at his desolate back and smiled playfully. Some of them were discussing with emotion. However, most people's gazes were focused on Ji Tianqing. Everyone looked at him with burning eyes. They were discussing and exclaiming excitedly. Their voices were filled with admiration and awe. That was how the world worked. Only the winner would receive everyone's attention, praise, and awe. Who would care about the loser's feelings? At that moment, Elder Yi Hong went up to the arena and announced loudly, "The first battle of the Heaven List tournament has ended. Ji Tianqing is the winner." Ji Tianqing is currently ranked 3rd on the Heaven List while Tang Yilua has dropped to 4th. As Yi Hong's voice fell, many disciples began to whisper to each other again. That's terrifying. How long has Ji Tianqing been in the inner gate? He's already ranked 3rd on the Heaven List. This guy must be the fastest to enter the top 3 of the Heaven List in history, right? Ji Tianqing has only been in the inner gate for 5 months. He's already the sect leader's disciple and ranked 3rd on the Heaven List. He's a monster. He just defeated by Wuxia and Tang Yilua. He defeated 2 elite geniuses consecutively. This is unbelievable. Do you think Ji Tianqing will continue to challenge the 2nd on the Heaven List? Are you kidding me? Senior brother Chen Su, who ranks 2nd on the Heaven List, is at LV9 Mystic Comprehending stage. He's 1 stage higher than Tang Yilua. Ji Tianqing has already fought 2 battles consecutively. No matter how monstrous he is, he can't possibly challenge 3 elite geniuses consecutively. Is he still human? Just as the crowd was discussing, Ji Tianqing looked down at Chen Su who was in the square. He looked indifferent and said coldly, "It's your turn." His words were concise and domineering. It was as if an invisible hand had clenched everyone's hearts. All the discussion stopped abruptly, and the huge square immediately quieted down. The hundreds of disciples all had horrified expressions on their faces. They widened their eyes in disbelief and cried out in alarm. "Oh my God! He actually wants to challenge the second on the heaven leaderboard. Ji Tianqing is going to challenge 3 elite geniuses in a row. Isn't this too abnormal? Is he still human? Don't you feel tired after fighting 2 battles in a row without consuming your true essence? He's too arrogant. Who would have thought that Ji Tianqing would go against Tianqing's plan and challenge 3 elite geniuses in a row? Ha ha ha. There's a good show to watch now. This year's Heaven Roll competition will definitely be the most exciting one in recent decades. Ji Tianqing is determined to create a miracle today and shock everyone's eyes out." The square was in an uproar. Hundreds of disciples were discussing excitedly. The elders and deacons also had complicated expressions on their faces as they discussed secretly. Only Chu Tian was sitting on the sect master's throne. His eyes were deep as he stared at the stage with a faint smile on his face. Yi Hong took a deep look at Ji Tianqing. Without saying anything, he turned and left the ring. Then, Chen Su stepped onto the ring under everyone's gaze and stood 10 meters away from Ji Tianqing. His expression was very dignified, and he no longer had the confidence and arrogance of an elite genius. He didn't expect that things would turn out like this. Tang Yiluo's previous words were right. If he couldn't defeat Ji Tianqing, the next one to suffer would be Chen Su. Now, Tang Yiluo's words had finally come true. Chen Su's mood was very complicated. His eyes were very dignified, and there was even a trace of regret in his heart. He regretted that if he had known that Ji Tianqing's strength was so abnormal, he wouldn't have mocked and ridiculed Ji Tianqing. But now that things had come to this, it was useless to think about it. Chen Su frowned as he looked at Ji Tianqing. He racked his brains to think of an excuse to persuade Ji Tianqing without using the giant flaming palm or the treasured sword. As the elite genius ranked second on the heaven leaderboard and a LV9 Tongxian stage martial artist, of course, he could see that Ji Tianqing's treasured sword was strange. Even if it was a black-grade treasured sword, it was impossible to slash out the divine dragon's shadow and display such a terrifying sword technique. Ji Tianqing's black dragon sword must be a divine weapon that surpassed the black grade. At this moment, Ji Tianqing saw that Chen Su was silent for a long time. He neither spoke nor had the intention to attack, so he said in a deep voice, "Senior brother Chen, draw your sword." Chen Su immediately came to his senses. He squeezed out a smile and said in a friendly tone, "Junior brother Ji, not only do we have no enmity, but I also admire you very much. The Heaven Leaderboard tournament is just a competition between fellow disciples. There's no need for us to make a big fuss. How about this? In order not to hurt the friendship between fellow disciples, you and I will not use any external forces. We won't use any treasured swords or weapons. Let's fight barehanded. What do you think?" Hearing Chen Su's high-sounding words, before Ji Tianqing could say anything, the hundreds of disciples in the square revealed strange expressions. They secretly snickered and discussed among themselves. "Ha ha ha, did you see? Senior brother Chen Su seems to be scared." Yes. In the previous Heaven Leaderboard tournament, which disciple didn't give it their all? Who would still care about the friendship between fellow disciples? Ji Tianqing fought 2 rounds in a row and easily defeated Senior Brother Bai and Senior Brother Tang. Ji Tianqing is a double attribute genius. How can Senior Brother Chen Su not be scared? TSK, these elite geniuses are not only strong, but their ability to lie through their teeth is also amazing. Ji Tianqing could easily defeat Senior Brother Bai and Senior Brother Tang because of the power of the giant flame palm and the treasured sword. If he doesn't use any weapons, I don't think he's a match for Senior Brother Chen. Hundreds of inner sect disciples discussed in groups of 3 to 5. Many of them were gloating and waiting to see Chen Su fall from his pedestal and lose face. However, there were also many disciples who felt that Ji Tianqing would not be a match for Chen Su if he did not have the help of the treasured sword. Just as everyone was arguing with each other, Ji Tianqing, who was on the arena, spoke. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Chen Su playfully. He said in a mocking tone, "I can't use the giant flame palm or the treasured sword. This is what Senior Brother Chen wants, right?" Chen Su was embarrassed and his cheeks were burning. He was so embarrassed that he did not dare to look at the expressions of Ji Tianqing and the others. He knew very well that everyone was laughing at him in their hearts. However, he did not have the slightest confidence that he could block the giant flame palm and the dragon god's sword. Chapter 302. Everyone could see that Chen Su was terrified. He was afraid of Ji Tianqing's giant flaming palm and the power of the black dragon sword. His real intention when he said those words to Ji Tianqing was to limit Ji Tianqing's trump card. However, no one expected that Ji Tianqing also understood this and still agreed to Chen Su's request. How much confidence did he need to have? Instantly, the hundreds of inner sect disciples were shocked, and they burst into a discussion like a flash flood. The deacons and elders in the spectator area all revealed playful smiles and looked at Ji Tianqing with interest. Everyone knew that a good show was about to begin. Ji Tianqing was not an arrogant person. Since he dared to agree to Chen Su's request, he must have enough confidence and certainty. Many people were so excited that their blood was boiling and they excitedly cheered for Ji Tianqing and Chen Su. The deacons and elders also revealed looks of anticipation. Chen Su's expression was obviously much more relaxed. He smiled at Ji Tianqing and said, "Junior brother Ji is indeed righteous and in high spirits. Senior brother admires you from the bottom of my heart." He cupped his fists and bowed to Ji Tianqing, then made a "please" gesture. "Junior brother Ji, please make your move." Chen Su's expression and tone became very confident again. There was even a playful smile at the corner of his mouth. In a situation where Ji Tianqing did not use the giant flaming palm and the black dragon sword, he believed that he had at least a 90% chance of winning. Ji Tianqing did not pretend to be polite with him. He shouted in a low voice and used the shadowless step to rush towards him. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing's speed was raised to the extreme. Like an afterimage, he rushed in front of Chen Su in the blink of an eye. His fists flashed with golden true essence and condensed into 2 basin-sized fist radiances. They exploded with a huge force and smashed towards Chen Su. Just in time. Chen Su was already prepared. He shouted with confidence and hurriedly swung his palm at Ji Tianqing. A green brilliance burst out from his palms, condensing into 2 green palm shadows, instantly blocking Ji Tianqing's fists. Bang! Bang! Their fists and palms collided fiercely, exploding out with a muffled sound, bursting out with a violent gale, blowing in all directions. This exchange of moves was just a test, and neither of them had gained the upper hand. Ji Tianqing immediately withdrew his fists and raised his right leg at lightning speed. Like a flood dragon emerging from the sea, he swept out towards Chen Su's waist. Chen Su's reaction was extremely fast. His footsteps shifted, and he dodged Ji Tianqing's attack like a ghost. In a flash, he rushed to Ji Tianqing's side, raised both his palms, and slapped toward Ji Tianqing's neck and chest. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to dodge. He quickly waved his fists and legs to launch a counterattack. The two of them fought in close combat. Their figures were as fast as the wind, constantly flashing around the ring, shuttling back and forth. The hundreds of disciples in the square could not see their fists and feet movements clearly. Everyone could only see two blurry afterimages, constantly colliding and overlapping, but soon separated again. Bang! 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 The sound of fists and feet colliding was endless, constantly echoing in the square. Ji Tianqing and Chen Su both used their full strength. Their fists and feet lit up with the brilliance of true essence. Every time their fists and feet collided, a biting cold wind would burst out, spreading in all directions. As the two of them fought more and more fiercely, a strong wind also blew on the ring, blowing the sand and stones on the ground, and the sky became dirty and chaotic. In a short span of 100 breaths, the two of them had already exchanged hundreds of moves. Although the two of them had their own merits in their fist techniques, palm techniques, and movement techniques, and both of them had taken a lot of blows from each other. But both of them were top geniuses. Their fighting techniques were extremely exquisite, and their defense was also very strong. It was difficult to determine the winner in a short time. Finally, Chen Su could not hold back the anxiety in his heart. He originally thought that in a bare-handed fight with Ji Tianqing, he would definitely be able to defeat him within 100 moves. But he never thought that even if Ji Tianqing did not use the giant flame palm or the black dragon sword, he would still have such powerful strength. He was full of anxiety and anger, so he no longer held back his strength and used his ultimate move with all his strength. 9 Annihilation Fist. Chen Su shouted coldly, and his whole body burst out with a soaring blue light. In an instant, he struck out 9 blue fist radiances, fiercely bombarding Ji Tianqing. Each fist radiance was as big as a water tank, containing 100% power, bombarding Ji Tianqing's vital points from different directions. The moment the fist radiance appeared, a hurricane blew up in the entire ring, and it trembled violently. Ji Tianqing's figure was immediately covered by the 9 huge fist radiances. At the critical moment, he still remained calm and composed. Thousand Feather Blade. He did not hesitate to urge 3 sword radiances, and used the ultimate move of the Flying Star Sword technique. Swish, swish, swish. The 3 sword radiances instantly split into 9 and flew back and forth like auroras, forming a golden sword net to protect himself. The 9 huge fist radiances hit the golden sword net with a series of muffled sounds. Chen Su's 9 Annihilation Fist was blocked, but the golden sword net was still intact. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the 9 golden sword radiances cut through the sky and attacked Chen Su. Each sword radiance was as fast as lightning, and the power that burst out was extremely fierce and violent. Swish, swish, swish. In just a breath's time, the 9 sword radiances launched nearly 200 attacks from different directions. Chen Su was immediately drowned by the sword radiances. His face turned pale, and he could not help but exclaim. Ji Tianqing! You broke your promise. You actually. Ah! But before he could finish his words, he abruptly stopped and turned into a painful scream. Obviously, Chen Su mistakenly thought that Ji Tianqing was using the Black Dragon sword, which was why he could perform such fierce and violent swordsmanship. Filled with rage, he punched back to block the sword radiances and cursed fiercely in his heart. But the sword radiances were too dense, and the speed of the attacks was extremely fast. It was impossible for him to block all of them. In just 5 breaths' time, the 9 sword radiances had attacked thousands of times. When the sword radiances dissipated, everyone saw that Chen Su's clothes were ragged, and his body was covered in blood. He was in a very sorry state. The white robe on his body had long been torn into a pile of rags by the sword radiances, and his body was covered with crisscrossing sword wounds and bloody holes. Dark red blood gushed out, dyeing him into a blood-red man. He glared at Ji Tianqing and roared angrily, Ji Tianqing! You despicable man! You said you wouldn't use the sword, but you went back on your word. Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, which eye of yours saw me use the sword? Everyone saw it with their own eyes. Do you still want to quibble? Chen Su shouted angrily. Ji Tianqing glanced at him as if he was looking at a fool, and said indifferently, then asked them, who saw me use the sword? Chen Su was stunned for a moment, and immediately turned his head to look at the disciples around the ring. However, as far as he could see, everyone was shaking their heads. In fact, many people even revealed mocking sneers. Their expressions were very strange. How could this be? Chen Su was stunned. Chapter 303. At that time, Chen Su was only trying his best to block the sword light and did not see Ji Tianqing's movements at all. Therefore, he was not sure if Ji Tianqing used a treasure sword. However, common sense told him that Ji Tianqing had to use a sword in order to display such an exquisite and sharp sword technique. Seeing Chen Su's dumbfounded expression as if the whole world was lying to him, Elder Yi Hong finally could not stand it anymore. Chen Su. You don't have to use a sword to display a sword technique. Yi Hong's tone was dignified as he reminded him with a loud voice. Chen Su was suddenly enlightened by his words and vaguely understood something. When he looked at Ji Tianqing again, the anger in his body dissipated, leaving only shame and embarrassment. Obviously, he made a fool of himself in front of all the disciples, deacons, and elders. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and asked indifferently, Chen Su, do you still want to fight? Don't waste time. Chen Su suddenly came back to his senses and was filled with anger again. He stared coldly at Ji Tianqing. Humph. Junior brother Ji, you're too arrogant. He shouted coldly and his figure turned into a green stream of light. He rushed at Ji Tianqing as fast as lightning and displayed his ultimate killing move. Celestial Tyrant Wild Dragon Slash. At that moment, Chen Su's entire body surged with a dazzling green light and his entire person turned into a giant green sword. He flew more than 10 meters into the air and exploded with his lifetime's power. He fell from the sky and slashed fiercely at Ji Tianqing. This move, Celestial Tyrant Wild Dragon Slash, was his ultimate sword technique. It could also be displayed without a treasure sword and with his own body as a sword. Countless disciples saw Chen Su's move and revealed a look of deep shock. They let out an incredulous exclamation. Heavens! Chen Su actually mastered this move. This is clearly the final killing move of the Celestial Dragon Sword technique. He actually used his own body as a sword to display it. Genius! As expected of a top genius. Chen Su's attainments in sword technique are really amazing. Not only the disciples, but even the deacons and elders nodded in satisfaction and smiled with praise. Chen Su's huge green sword was about to strike Ji Tianqing. At the critical moment, he remained calm and collected. He urged the sword embryo in his body to fly out of his body and turn into a huge dark golden sword. Shwa! The huge golden sword transformed from the sword embryo was 4 meters long. It shone with a dazzling brilliance and was surrounded by blazing red flames. Crimson flames rose and swayed, making the giant sword look like a flaming divine dragon. Go! Ji Tianqing let out a low growl. He pushed his hands forward and manipulated the flame divine dragon to meet the giant green sword in midair. An instant later, the flame divine dragon collided with the green light giant sword, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Boom! The loud noise reverberated throughout the mountain peak, causing the square to tremble. The green light giant sword exploded on the spot, emitting green light fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Ji Tianqing's sword embryo also emitted true red fire that blotted out the sky and covered the entire arena. In an instant, the arena turned into a sea of fire and the scene inside could not be seen clearly. The violent and devastating shockwaves and the surging flames were all blocked by the defensive formation of the arena. Even so, the disciples standing near the arena could still feel the terrifyingly high temperature and blazing heat waves through the defensive array. Everyone could not help but be shocked. They thought to themselves, if I was in the arena and was drowned by the sea of fire, how painful would it be? I'm afraid I would have been burned to ashes long ago. Hao Meng, who was in the crowd, was also shocked. He muttered with mixed feelings, Ji Tianqing is really abnormally strong. Chen Su miscalculated. I'm afraid he's completely defeated. Even if Ji Tianqing promised him not to use the giant flaming palm or the sword, how could he have imagined? But how could he have known that even if Ji Tianqing was bare-handed, he would still be able to perform a shocking sword art? This was something he had experienced deeply when he joined forces with Ji Tianqing to besiege the sorceress. Therefore, when Ji Tianqing promised Chen Su not to use the sword, he had already expected this outcome. After a long time, the true red fire that blotted out the sky and covered the earth dissipated. The giant golden sword also shrunk to the size of a thumb and flew back into Ji Tianqing's body. The arena regained its peace and the vision became clear again. Everyone's eyes were focused on the arena, searching for Ji Tianqing and Chen Su. Ji Tianqing stood upright in the arena. He was still unscathed, but his face was a little pale, and his aura had become a little weaker. After all, he had used his strongest trump card to defeat Chen Su, the sword embryo. That sword had consumed at least 70% of his vital core. Although he wasn't injured, he still needed to recuperate for a few days before he could recover his strength. Chen Su's outcome was extremely miserable. His entire body was charred black as he laid on the ground and emitted waves of painful moans. Black smoke continuously curled up from his mouth, nose, and head, like a piece of charcoal that hadn't been extinguished. Being heavily injured to this extent, he had obviously lost his ability to fight. He struggled a few times but was unable to stand up. Fortunately, he was a 9th-level profound comprehension stage genius, and his true combat strength was comparable to a 1st-level origin core stage expert. If it was an ordinary profound comprehension stage expert, he would have long since been blasted into pieces by Ji Tianqing's sword embryo. When everyone saw Chen Su's appearance, they couldn't help but stare with wide eyes, revealing dense astonishment. The expressions of the hundreds of disciples changed abruptly, and the gazes they looked at Ji Tianqing with were filled with reverence and fear. No one dared to believe that the 9th-level profound comprehension stage genius, Chen Su, was actually defeated on the spot, and in such a sorry state. Even the deacons and elders, who were experienced and knowledgeable, were shocked by this and began to whisper in each other's ears. Elder Yi Hong endured the shock in his heart as he stepped onto the arena and loudly announced the results. The second battle, Ji Tianqing wins. Ji Tianqing has seized the 2nd position on the heaven rankings, and Chen Su has dropped to the 3rd position. As his loud and clear voice spread throughout the square, a deafening sound broke out in the square. Ji Tianqing had once again created a brilliant battle record, shocking everyone. He fought 3 consecutive battles without resting and actually consecutively defeated 3 of the most outstanding elite geniuses. This was simply a miracle. Throughout the Sky Pillar sect's 100 years of history, such a monstrous genius had never appeared in the sect. Most importantly, Ji Tianqing had only entered the inner court for a little over a month. His heaven-defying speed and battle record even surpassed Yun Yao. Countless disciples were unable to understand. Who the heck was this fellow? At the same time, Yi Hong waved his hand, indicating 2 deacons to bring Chen Su away to treat his injuries. After Chen Su was carried away, he walked to Ji Tianqing's side and asked in a deep voice, Ji Tianqing, do you still want to continue challenging? Yi Hong's tone was very solemn and serious, but at the same time, there was some excitement and anticipation. After all, Ji Tianqing was already the 2nd position on the heaven rankings. If he continued to challenge, he could only challenge the 1st position on the heaven rankings, the number 1 genius of the Tianjin region, Yun Yao. Everyone in the plaza realized this and immediately quieted down. Everyone stared at Ji Tianqing with wide eyes, waiting to see how he would choose. Even Chu Tiansheng, who was sitting on the throne, looked at him with a smile. Yunyao did not look at Ji Tianqing. Her eyes were looking at the scenery in the distance, and her expression and eyes were very calm. Chapter 304. Everyone held their breaths and stared at Ji Tianqing, waiting for his answer. He shook his head gently and said calmly to Yi Hong, "Elder Yi, I'm done. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Goodbye." After that, he cupped his hands and bowed to Yi Hong. He left the arena under everyone's watchful eyes. He turned around and walked away calmly. Everyone was stunned. The square was silent for a long time. Everyone stared at Ji Tianqing until his figure disappeared at the end of the tree-lined path. Only then did they regain their senses. The Heaven List tournament was extremely important to everyone. It was solemn and sacred. Even the disciples who did not participate in the tournament would put everything aside to watch. The disciples who participated in the tournament treated it as their top priority every year and did not dare to neglect it. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, remained indifferent from the beginning to the end. The significance of the Heaven List tournament, the generous rewards and honor of being in the top 3, did not seem to be attractive to him. He participated in the Heaven List tournament only to step on by Wuxia and defeat Tang Yilua and Chen Su. Other than that, he did not take anything else to heart. He had successfully won second place on the Heaven List and achieved his goal, so he left. Countless disciples had complicated expressions on their faces, and the admiration in their eyes grew even stronger. I don't know if senior brother Ji is too arrogant or if it's just his nature. It's unbelievable. Look at senior brother Ji's carefree and confident manner. He obviously knew that he could defeat the 3 elite geniuses. That's why he fought 3 consecutive battles. Other than eldest senior sister, I'm afraid no one on the Heaven List can enter senior brother Ji's eyes. Sigh, what a pity. I wanted to see senior brother Ji and eldest senior sister fight. I heard that senior brother Ji and eldest senior sister are very close. In the sect leader's eyes, they are a perfect match. He. Do you think senior brother Ji did not continue to challenge eldest senior sister because he fell in love with her? Hey, can you not laugh so wretchedly? Senior martial brother Ji and eldest senior martial sister are a match made in heaven. Why do you sound so weird? Lower your voices, eldest senior sister and sect leader are both here. If they hear you too can go to the pigsty to raise pigs. Amidst the discussions of countless disciples, Yi Hong solemnly announced that the Heaven List tournament would continue. The 100 disciples who were qualified to participate in the grand competition could all issue challenges to the Heaven Leaderboard rankings. Soon, some outstanding disciples went up the stage to challenge their opponents and began to fight with them. The strength of these disciples was not bad. When they fought with all their strength, the various sword techniques and martial skills they displayed were also very exquisite and brilliant. However, the hundreds of disciples around the arena all had a disinterested look on their faces. They had no interest in watching. It couldn't be helped. Ji Tianqing's 3 top-level battles had left an unforgettable impression on everyone. In comparison, the battles of these ordinary disciples had become dull and boring. Even if the disciples on the stage changed one after another, the crowd was too lazy to look at them. Many people were still discussing the battle between Ji Tianqing and the 3 elite geniuses. There was no doubt that after today's Heaven List tournament ended, Ji Tianqing's monstrous genius name would shake the entire Sky Pillar sect. Ji Tianqing left the inner sect square in advance not because he was pretending to be cold and arrogant, but because he really had something to do. In his opinion, he had already defeated Bai Wuchen, Tang Yilua, and Chen Su. His goal had already been achieved. It would be a waste of time to continue staying in the inner sect square. He might as well leave early and rush to Dragon Mountain to do business. Ever since he received the Heaven Origin Array formation from Ba Xia in the ancient Star Palace, he had been thinking about the Dragon Mountain tomb. He only wanted to go to Dragon Mountain as soon as possible to investigate the situation of the tomb. After returning to Tianqing's courtyard, Ji Tianqing rested for a while before riding Qian Yu and leaving the Sky Pillar sect, rushing in the direction of Dragon Mountain. Qian Yu flew high in the sky and arrived at Dragon Mountain 3 hours later. It landed on the peak of Dragon Mountain. There were guards from the Sky Pillar sect standing guard at the peak of the mountain. Seeing Ji Tianqing show his identity token, the guards let him in. Ji Tianqing put Qian Yu into the 100 treasures brocade pouch and went to the entrance of the mine halfway up the mountain. He negotiated with the deacon guarding the entrance before he was allowed to enter the mine. He walked through the complicated and winding mine tunnels and rushed to the deepest part of the mine. In the dark mine tunnels, many odd-job disciples were still working hard, mining ores as usual. However, the Sky Pillar sect's mining method was more gentle, unlike the Tianjian sect's violent destruction. An hour later, Ji Tianqing arrived at the deepest part of the mine tunnel and came to the edge of the cliff. There were 2 rope ladders on the cliff and guards guarding them. Ji Tianqing's identity was special, so he naturally could go down the rope ladders to the bottom of the cliff unimpeded. Not long after, he passed through the dark and ancient tunnel and arrived at the ancient and dilapidated square. At the end of the square, the 1,000-meter Heaven Origin formation was still shining with colorful brilliance and exuding a majestic and heavy aura. From afar, he could vaguely see a few figures walking around the Tianyuan Grand Array. These figures didn't approach the Heaven Origin formation and only moved around outside, as if they were patrolling guards. At this time, a burly man in purple robes walked over quickly like the wind. This man was Chu Huaishan, who had been ordered to guard the ancient tomb in Mount Longshan. When Chu Huaishan saw that it was Ji Tianqing, he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. Ji Tianqing. Why are you here? Greetings, Elder Chu. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands in greeting and explained, this disciple has some unanswered questions, so I came to take a look at the ancient tomb. Chu Huaishan nodded and said with a solemn expression, Ji Tianqing, it's fine for you to take a look at the ancient tomb, but you can't get close to the Heaven Origin formation. Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and asked in confusion, oh. What's going on here? Chu Huaishan sighed and explained in a heavy tone, more than a month ago, the sect master came here to carefully examine the formation, and there was almost an accident. After that, the sect master ordered us to guard the ancient tomb, but not to try to crack the formation again. This formation is very dangerous. If we make a mistake while trying to crack it, the formation will explode, and the entire ancient tomb will be blown to smithereens. Sect Master Chu Tianqing's instructions were the same as what Dragon Sun Baxia had said before. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. After chatting with Chu Huaishan for a while, he walked to the front of the formation and observed its structure up close. Now that he was an array master, when he observed the ancient tomb's protective array, he could clearly see the structure of the array and identify the 5 ways to construct it. Moreover, his gaze could see through the 5-colored light barrier and the words on the huge black stone tablet in the ancient tomb. There were a few huge and ancient seal words on the tablet, which read, the Tomb of Master Kenshin. On the bottom left of the ancient stone tablet, there were a few small vertical words. Chapter 305. Ji Tianqing's body suddenly trembled when he saw the 2 lines of words on the ancient tomb's stone tablet. A strange light flashed in his eyes. His expression became complicated, and his brows were tightly knitted together. He never would have thought that the ancient seal characters carved on the stone tablet were actually those 12 characters. Before this, he had always thought that this 1,000-year-old ancient tomb was Emperor Ye's tomb. Emperor Yi had been enlightened and taught by Kenshin, so this ancient tomb had some connection with Kenshin. But he never expected that this 1,000-year-old ancient tomb was also a Kenshin tomb, and it was built by Emperor Yi. How could this be? What was going on? Ji Tianqing's mind was full of doubts and puzzlement. After a long time, his expression returned to calmness. Seeing that there was no one around, he sat down on a big rock. His consciousness focused on his dantian, and immediately passed through the black hole and entered Kenshin's tomb. Swoosh! His consciousness formed a translucent human figure and appeared in the dark and cold space. He flew over the wasteland and soon arrived under the huge sword tablet that towered between heaven and earth. Senior Burial of Heaven. I have a very important matter that I would like to consult you on. Ji Tianxing called a few times, and Burial of Heaven's ancient voice came from the huge sword tablet. What is it? Speak. Ji Tianxing hurriedly told Burial of Heaven the 12 words he saw without missing a word. Senior Burial of Heaven, this is actually another Kenshin tomb. How could this be? Burial of Heaven said in a deep voice without hesitation, it's fake. There is only one real Kenshin tomb, and it is here. The others are all fake. Its tone was firm and resolute, and there was no room for doubt. Ji Tianxing also guessed this result and nodded, I think so too. But why did Ren Huangyi build a fake tomb of the sword god here? Burial of Heaven pondered for a moment, and then said in a serious tone, I'm afraid you'll only know the answer to this question after you break the Tianyuan formation and enter the ancient tomb. Ji Tianxing asked 2 more related questions, and then left the dark space. Swoosh! His consciousness returned to his body, and he sat on the big rock, staring at the Tianyuan formation with shining eyes. The formation's colorful brilliance was still dazzling, and the stone tablet and tomb in the formation still exuded an ancient aura. In Ji Tianxing's eyes, this fake Kenshin tomb became more and more mysterious, and it definitely hid a deeper secret. I really want to break the formation as soon as possible and enter the ancient tomb. Unfortunately, although I have mastered the method, I'm not strong enough. Sigh. Ji Tianxing murmured in his heart and could not help but sigh. After a long time, he got up and walked toward the dilapidated square. When he arrived at the square, he greeted Chu Huaishan and left the ancient tomb. He climbed up the cliff along the rope ladder and returned the way he came. After walking out of the mine halfway up the mountain, he rode Qianyue and left Dragon Mountain, returning to the Sky Pillar sect. When he returned to Tianqing Courtyard, it was already evening. The Heaven Roll tournament had just ended. There were changes in the Heaven Roll rankings, and a few disciples on the Heaven Roll had fallen off, and a few new disciples had entered the Heaven Roll. However, these were all insignificant matters that no one cared about. What the countless disciples were discussing was still the scenes of Ji Tianxing's 3 battles. Ji Tianxing returned to his room and rested for a moment. His maid, Xiao Shuang, came to the door to report the news. Senior brother Ji, 2 senior brothers have come to visit. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but frown. He thought to himself with some doubt, 2 people came to visit together. Who could it be? After hesitating for a moment, he ordered Xiao Shuang, let them in. Not long after, Xiao Shuang led the 2 white-robed youths into the living room. Ji Tianxing entered the living room and saw that the 2 white-robed youths were inner disciples. However, he was unfamiliar with them and didn't know them. When the 2 youths saw him enter the living room, they immediately stood up and bowed respectfully. They smiled and said, Congratulations, Senior Brother Ji. Senior Brother Ji fought 3 battles in a row today and won all 3 battles. It can be said that you are incomparably valiant and honorable. Senior Brother Ji, the 2 of us took the liberty of visiting to congratulate Senior Brother Ji for ascending to 2nd place on the Heaven Roll. This is a small gift from the 2 of us. We hope that Senior Brother Ji can accept it. The 2 youths flattered Ji Tianxing for a while before revealing their intentions. They were here to congratulate him with gifts. As the saying goes, one doesn't hit a smiling person. Although Ji Tianxing didn't have a good impression of the 2 disciples, he didn't go so far as to speak ill of them. He exchanged a few pleasantries with the 2 of them calmly and declined their gifts. He then asked the maidservant, Xiao Shuang, to send the 2 of them away. The 2 disciples were filled with regret as they bid farewell and left. In their hearts, they were still wondering if they had prepared too few gifts for senior brother Ji to take a liking to them. As soon as the two of them left, 3 more inner disciples came together and visited Ji Tianqing with gifts. The 3 disciples' intentions and excuses were the same as the 2 disciples before them. To put it bluntly, these disciples wanted to get close to Ji Tianqing and form a good relationship with him. Even if they didn't have anything to ask for, they wanted to get acquainted with Ji Tianqing so that they could have more support in the sect in the future. After all, Ji Tianqing was not only the sect leader's disciple, but he was also in the limelight today. He had created an incomparably brilliant and dazzling battle record and ascended to 2nd place on the heaven roll. He was now the most famous elite genius in the sect. His limelight had even overshadowed the eldest senior sister, Yunyao. As long as the disciples had brains, they knew that between Ji Tianqing and Yunyao, one of them would definitely succeed the position of sect leader in the future. As for Ji Tianqing, this new genius, the quick-witted disciples naturally wanted to curry favor with him as soon as possible. However, Ji Tianqing saw through these disciples' thoughts at a glance. With an indifferent expression, he replied with a few words and sent the 3 disciples away. As for the gifts that the 3 of them brought, he didn't even bother to look at them. He also let the 3 disciples take them away untouched. After that, batches and batches of inner disciples rushed to the Tianqing courtyard in an endless stream. They came to visit Ji Tianqing with lavish gifts. Ji Tianqing was annoyed beyond words. He didn't bother to feign civility with those disciples. It was simply a waste of time. He simply went out and left the Tianqing courtyard. The sky was already dark, and night was about to arrive. Ji Tianqing had nothing to do. He suddenly thought of someone and an idea popped up in his mind. Back then, I promised Yan that I would visit him when I had time. It's already been more than a month. I almost forgot about this matter. Thus, he rode Qian Yu and flew out of the Sky Pillar sect. He flew through the night as fast as lightning and rushed towards Boundless Mountain. 2 hours later, Ji Tianqing arrived at Boundless Mountain. Qian Yu landed outside the Boundless Cave. Ji Tianqing put it into the 100 treasures brocade pouch and stepped into the Boundless Cave. The flames on the rock walls of the cave became brighter and brighter, and the temperature became hotter. Chapter 306. Ji Tianqing could clearly feel that the temperature and flames in the Boundless Cave were more violent than the first time he came here. He passed through the long and winding passageway and entered the spacious cave where Yan was. This feeling was even more obvious. In the 100-meter wide Boundless Cave, the air was so hot that it seemed like it was going to burn. Wisps of dark yellow flames floated in the air, and the ground and cave walls were dark red. Even the spirit herbs and lingji mushrooms growing in the corners of the cave were growing faster and were not far from maturity. In the middle of the cave, the dozen or so millstone stones became increasingly red like fire. The surface of the heavenly frost ice cocoon, the giant gray egg that enveloped Yan was also covered in cracks. Ji Tianqing was observing the heavenly frost ice cocoon when he suddenly heard a low and dignified roar coming from the corner of the cave. He turned his head to look at the pile of stones in the corner and saw a huge golden-eyed white tiger. The golden-eyed white tiger arched its body and stared at him. Its entire body was accumulating violent energy as it constantly let out what seemed to be a warning roar. Ji Tianqing glanced at the golden-eyed white tiger and could not help but raise his eyebrows as he muttered in a mocking tone. "You stupid white tiger, don't you recognize me? Or, are you still holding a grudge from last time?" The golden-eyed white tiger seemed to be able to understand human language and stopped roaring as expected. However, it still stared at Ji Tianqing warily. Ji Tianqing no longer paid attention to the golden-eyed white tiger. His eyes focused on the heavenly frost ice cocoon in the great formation and called out in a low voice, "Yan, Yan, senior brother has come to see you." After he called out a few times, Yan woke up and asked in a pleasantly surprised tone, Senior Brother Tianqing, are you here? It's me. I've come to see you today. Ji Tianqing responded and asked in a gentle tone, Yan, are you feeling better recently? Yan Er's mood was good and his tone also revealed a hint of joy. He quickly answered, thank you for your concern, Senior Brother Tianqing. I've been feeling much better recently. Much of the wildfire in my body has been expelled. It's not as painful as before. Ji Tianqing smiled and felt gratified for him. He asked with concern, Yan, when will you recover and come out of the heavenly cold ice cocoon? Yan was silent for a moment and said in a somewhat depressed mood, Senior Brother Tianqing, I don't know either. Although Master set up this great formation for me and used the spirit vein and the heavenly frost ice cocoon to help me control the wildfire in my body, it's still not enough. However, there's a problem. If I can't solve it, I won't be able to completely dispel the wildfire, and I won't be able to leave the heavenly frost ice cocoon. Ji Tianqing could hear that Yan was very distressed and worried about this. Thinking that Yan was only 10 years old and had already suffered unimaginable pain and torture, he felt sympathy for him and quickly asked, Yan what's the problem? Yan explained in a serious tone, in this 1 year, I have been constantly expelling the wildfire from my body, causing it to scatter throughout the boundless cave. Now, I've only released about 20% of it, and the boundless cave has turned into a sea of fire. If I expel all the wildfire in my body, what should I do with it? Wildfire is different from ordinary flames. It is one of the most berserk and powerful fire-attributed energies. It has the power to destroy the world. Ji Tianqing knew that what Yan said was true. Wildfire was indeed one of the strongest flames in the world. It was said that in the savage era after the world was created, the world was filled with heavenly lightning, wildfire, profound water, and thick earth. It was these four energies that contained the power of destruction and rebirth that gave birth to countless mountains, rivers, forests, and seas. These four ancient and mysterious energies were close to the power of a god. Because of this, Yan only needed to expel 20% of the wildfire in his body to turn the boundless cave and the entire boundless mountain into a mountain of flames. If he expelled all the wildfire in his body, no one would be able to withstand it, much less refine it. If he casually threw away the wildfire or poured it into boundless mountain, it would definitely cause a huge disaster. At that time, not only would the entire boundless mountain be burned into magma, but the wildfire would also spread and burn the mountains and rivers within a radius of a few hundred miles. Boundless Mountain was less than 150 miles away from the sky-bearing sect. After the wildfire spread, even the sky-bearing sect would be affected. Understanding this point, Ji Tianqing also revealed a solemn expression. He nodded and said, Yan, I can understand your feelings and your worries. Wildfire has the power to burn the world. It really can't be disposed of casually. However, don't worry. I'll help you think of a way. Yan responded and said calmly, thank you, Senior Brother Tianqing. Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind as he considered how to dispose of the wildfire. After a moment, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He turned his head to look at the golden-eyed white tiger in the corner of the cave and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. A smile appeared in his eyes. He carefully sized up the golden-eyed white tiger and said in a playful tone, Yan, that golden-eyed white tiger has been entrenched here for nearly a year, silently guarding you, right? Yan didn't think too much about it and replied subconsciously, yes, Senior Brother Tianqing, is there a problem? Ji Tianqing smiled and said, Yan, that golden-eyed white tiger has been guarding you for a year. I see that it has refined a lot of the wildfire's power and can control it. You can expel the wildfire from your body and try to let the golden-eyed white tiger refine it. Maybe it can absorb the wildfire. Yan was startled and asked hesitantly, Senior Brother Tianqing, will this work? There won't be any problems, right? Ji Tianqing said with a solemn expression, there may be some risks, but this should be the most reliable method. We're just trying it out. If it doesn't work, we'll stop in time. If it works, it'll be the best of both worlds. Not only can you get rid of the pain of being burned by the wildfire, but the golden-eyed white tiger can also refine the wildfire and greatly increase its strength. To it, this is also a fortuitous encounter and good fortune. After listening to Ji Tianqing's persuasion, Yan thought for a moment before making up his mind to give it a try. Okay, senior brother Tianqing, we'll do as you say and give it a try. The golden-eyed white tiger had guarded him for a year and had a certain level of trust and affection with him. If Ji Tianqing's method worked, not only could he get rid of the torture of the wildfire, but the golden-eyed white tiger could also refine the wildfire and become a higher-level spirit beast. This was indeed the best of both worlds. Seeing that Yan agreed, Ji Tianqing opened the 100 treasures brocade pouch and released Qian Yu. He ordered the contract, Qian Yu, go talk to that golden-eyed white tiger. Ask it if it can refine the wildfire's power in Yan's body. Okay, leave it to me. Chapter 307. Qian Yu looked down at the golden-eyed white tiger and asked in a special beast language. Hey, little white. Your little master wants to give you the wildfire in his body. Do you want it? The golden-eyed white tiger was originally staring at it with an indifferent gaze and a vigilant posture. Suddenly hearing this, the golden-eyed white tiger immediately jumped out of the stone pile and roared at Yan, who was in the heavenly ice cocoon. Ji Tianqing and Yan did not understand what it meant, but Qian Yu understood. He smiled and explained to Ji Tianqing, Old Ji, little white is very excited and said I want it. I want. Qian Yu's tone was strange and his eyes revealed a trace of foxy charm. Ji Tianqing pretended not to hear anything and said to Yan, with a serious expression, Yan, first use your power to force out a ball of wildfire and see if the golden-eyed white tiger can refine it. Yan did as he was told and immediately used his power to expel the wildfire in his body. Soon, wisps of yellowish-brown flames overflowed from the cracks of the heavenly ice cocoon. Ji Tianqing used his lifetime's power to gather in his left arm, causing his entire left arm to turn scarlet red. He reached out his left hand and grabbed the wildfire, mixing the wisps of wildfire into a yellowish-brown ball of light. As more and more wildfire overflowed from the heavenly ice cocoon, the ball of wildfire in his left hand grew bigger and bigger. After 100 breaths of time, Yan stopped using his power. The ball of wildfire in Ji Tianqing's left hand had also grown to the size of an egg. Yan said worriedly, Senior brother Tianqing, be careful. Don't get hurt by the wildfire. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Ji Tianqing shook his head gently, indicating that he did not need to worry. Although he held the ball of wildfire in his left hand, the wildfire's extreme heat and violent power was more domineering than his scarlet true fire. However, he would only be in contact with the wildfire for a short period of time and would not be hurt. Qian Yu, tell the golden-eyed white tiger to sacrifice its demon core and see if it can refine this ball of wildfire. Qian Yu nodded and jumped in front of the golden-eyed white tiger and spoke to it in beast language. The golden-eyed white tiger roared again and stared at the wildfire in Ji Tianqing's hand, revealing a look of desire. Desire. It circled around Ji Tianqing twice to make sure that Ji Tianqing had no ill intentions. Only then did it let down its guard. It carefully opened its mouth and spat out an egg-sized yellow pill. This pill, which was completely condensed from yuan qi and demonic power, was the demonic pill of the golden-eyed white tiger. Only a greater demon whose strength was comparable to an origin core martial artist was able to condense a demon core within their body. It was white tiger was white tiger was white tiger white tigers. It was beast was to be careful not it to dragon, white tiger was white tiger at white tiger slowly. Slowly white tiger. Slowly. Slowly, 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 slowly white tiger, white whites white it, slowly, slowly, white. Then, the demon core released a strong devouring power and gradually swallowed the ball of wildfire. The demon core was enveloped by the yellowish-brown wildfire and started to spin faster. Ji Tianqing stared at the golden-eyed white tiger and the demon core, observing its reaction. Fortunately, the golden-eyed white tiger was lying on the ground quietly and focused on refining the wildfire. There was no abnormal reaction. Its demon core was also spinning without any abnormalities. After about 15 minutes, the demon core completely absorbed the ball of wildfire. The golden-eyed white tiger opened its mouth and swallowed the demon core back into its body. It got up and moved around for a while. Its aura became stronger, and the flames around its body became more violent and blazing. It was obvious that the golden-eyed white tiger had successfully refined the ball of wildfire. There was no adverse reaction, and its strength had increased by a lot. Ji Tianqing immediately smiled and said to Yen, I was right. In this year, the golden-eyed white tiger has already refined a large amount of wildfire. Now, it can quickly refine and absorb the wildfire that you expel. Yen was also excited. She said happily, Senior Brother Tianqing, thank you. I'm finally saved. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, Yen we can't be happy too early. This matter needs a process. You have to wait patiently. How about this? You continue to expel the wildfire from your body. I'll help you transfer it and let the golden-eyed white tiger refine it bit by bit. Okay. Thank you, Senior Brother Tianqing. Yen quickly nodded and thanked him in a clear voice. Next, Yen focused on cultivating in the heavenly frost ice cocoon, expelling the wildfire from her body. Ji Tianqing sat on a millstone outside the ice cocoon. He used his left hand to collect strands of wildfire and mixed them into balls of wildfire. To ensure that there were no accidents, he mixed the wildfire to the size of an egg and gave it to the golden-eyed white tiger to refine. In the beginning, the golden-eyed white tiger still needed to use its demon core to refine the wildfire. Not only did this process have to be careful, but it also wasted a lot of time. Later on, after the golden-eyed white tiger refined more than a dozen balls of wildfire, its control of the wildfire became stronger. It did not need to use its demon core. It could open its mouth and swallow the wildfire in one gulp and quickly refine it. As time passed, it swallowed more and more wildfire, and its strength was rapidly increasing. Its aura became stronger and stronger. Even the flames surging all over its body became more dazzling. Unknowingly, a day passed. The golden-eyed white tiger swallowed more than 300 balls of wildfire. Its strength had nearly doubled, and its body had also grown bigger. Ji Tianqing saw the changes and asked Yen, how much wildfire is left in your body? Yen, quickly answered, Senior Brother Tianqing, I've already expelled 30%. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. A look of surprise flashed across his eyes. He thought to himself with a heart full of shock, Yen only expelled 30% of the wildfire, and it made a great demon-level golden-eyed white tiger have such a huge change. Its strength increased by a realm. If he expelled all of the wildfire, wouldn't this golden-eyed white tiger's strength increase another 2 realms? Too inconceivable. The wildfire treasured body is actually so powerful. After his emotions calmed down, Ji Tianqing continued to get busy again. Yen continuously circulated his power to expel the wildfire. The pain and torture his body suffered also became weaker and weaker. Countless wildfire surged out of the cracks in the ice cocoon. Ji Tianqing constantly waved his left hand, collecting the wildfire and giving it to the golden-eyed white tiger to devour. The golden-eyed white tiger was in high spirits, appearing very excited. It seemed to be tireless, like a bottomless pit, continuously devouring ball after ball of wildfire. Its strength also constantly skyrocketed. Very soon, 3 days and 3 nights passed. Yen finally completely expelled the wildfire in his body, successfully dispelling the wildfire-treasured body. Chapter 308. After the golden-eyed white tiger swallowed all of the wildfire, it was finally unable to bear the burden and fell into a deep sleep on the ground. Although it wouldn't be in any danger, it still needed to sleep for a period of time before it could completely refine the wildfire. Ji Tianqing could sense that the golden-eyed white tiger's strength was originally only equivalent to the first level of the origin core stage. After it swallowed Yen's wildfire, it actually reached a level comparable to the 4th level of the origin core stage. Right at this moment, a burst of cracking sounds sounded out. Ji Tianqing turned his head to look and noticed that the grayish-white enormous egg, the heavenly frost ice cocoon, was quickly breaking apart and collapsing. The cracks on the eggshell grew larger and larger, and it soon completely shattered. After the heavenly frost ice cocoon completely shattered, a little boy around the age of 10 appeared before Ji Tianqing. This boy wore a white robe. He wasn't tall, and his figure was slightly thin and weak. He had a head of dark red hair. His little face was fair and handsome, with an exotic temperament unique to the Fire Clan, and there was even a crimson-red flame mark on his forehead. When he saw his appearance clearly, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but secretly think in his heart, that Fire Emperor and Fire Empress must be dragons and phoenixes among men. Otherwise, how could they give birth to such a handsome little genius like Yen? Yen was sitting on the shattered eggshell with his palms spread out on his knees. 2 balls of flames of different colors rose from his palms. His left hand was the black extreme frostine flame, and his right hand was the purple crimson sun violet flame. 2 types of flames with opposite attributes surged in his palms, but they revealed a mysterious and domineering aura. Without the shackles and torment of the wildfire, he recovered his outstanding martial Dao talent and could perfectly control 2 innate bloodlines, freely withdrawing and releasing 2 types of flame energy. Yen had just gotten rid of the wildfire-treasured body, so he also needed to circulate his energy and recuperate for a period of time before he could leave this great formation. Ji Tianqing saw that he and the golden-eyed white tiger both needed to recuperate, so he sat cross-legged in the cave and closed his eyes to rest while silently waiting. Time quietly passed, and a day quickly passed. The golden-eyed white tiger was the first to wake up. It opened its big eyes and looked around. Its gaze fell on Yen. It couldn't enter the array, so it lay down near the millstone. It stared at Yen without blinking, silently guarding him. Not long after, Yen also ended his cultivation and truly woke up. He opened his eyes and saw Ji Tianqing sitting not far away. A smile appeared on his handsome little face as he hurriedly shouted, "Senior brother Tianqing." Ji Tianqing nodded to him and asked with a smile, "Yen, how do you feel now?" Yen hurriedly nodded and said with joy, "Senior apprentice brother Tianqing, I've already completely recovered. I don't need to be troubled by the wildfire anymore. Senior brother Tianqing, thank you so much. If it weren't for your help, I don't know how long it would take for me to recover." As he spoke, he got up and walked out of the array towards Ji Tianqing. Just as he walked past the millstone, the golden-eyed white tiger hurriedly came over and used its head to gently rub his leg. Yen lowered his head to look at the docile golden-eyed white tiger and could not help revealing a face full of smiles. He reached out and touched the golden horn on the golden-eyed white tiger's head and said with a smile, "Little White, thank you for protecting me this year." The originally fierce and mighty golden-eyed white tiger was obedient to the extreme in front of Yen, allowing him to stroke the horn on its head. Yen walked to Ji Tianqing's side. The golden-eyed white tiger followed closely behind him. Ji Tianqing chatted with Yen for a while and was about to bring him out of the endless cave. "Yen you slept in the endless cave for so long. Master and eldest senior sister both missed you very much. Now that you've finally got rid of the nightmare and recovered, let's return to the sect as soon as possible and report the good news to Master and eldest senior sister. Yen nodded repeatedly and said, okay. The two turned around and left the endless cave, passing through the narrow and winding passage, and walked out of the mountain. The golden-eyed white tiger followed behind Yen step by step. Clearly, it was unwilling to leave. When the two walked out of the endless cave and arrived at the entrance of the cave, the sun had just risen. When Ji Tianqing saw the golden-eyed white tiger following Yen closely, he could not help but laugh and tease, "Junior brother Yen, this white tiger has been with you for a year and has refined your wildfire. It seems that it is determined to stick to you. Since it is so intelligent and refuses to leave, why don't you kindly take it in and be a pet beast companion?" Yen was also quite moved. He hurriedly turned his head to look at the golden-eyed white tiger and asked with a serious face, "Little White, are you willing to follow me and be my pet beast companion?" The golden-eyed white tiger could not speak human language for the time being. It just looked at Yen quietly and did not react. Yen immediately clapped his hands happily and said with a face full of joy, "You didn't refuse, then I'll take it as your acquiescence." With that, he stretched out his hands and hugged the golden-eyed white tiger's neck, rubbing against its furry body a few times. The golden-eyed white tiger hurriedly lowered its front body and let Yen sit on its back. After Yen sat firmly, the golden-eyed white tiger took a step forward and ran wildly towards the foot of the mountain. Swish! As the golden-eyed white tiger ran with all its might, its body turned into a white afterimage, as fast as the wind. Yen adjusted his balance and tried to ride the golden-eyed white tiger through the mountain forest. Even after the white tiger had run far away, Yen's happy and innocent laughter still echoed in the mountain forest. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing also revealed a smile and hurriedly chased after him on Qianyu. Under the golden morning sun, the mountains were resplendent and full of greenery. The golden-eyed white tiger carried Yen and ran between the mountains, returning in the direction of the Sky Pillar sect. Ji Tianqing rode Qianyu and flew high in the sky, following closely behind the golden-eyed white tiger and Yen. Seeing the golden-eyed white tiger running wildly and Yen laughing to his heart's content, his mood became much better. He could guess that perhaps Yen was originally a cheerful and lively child. Ever since he was burned by the wildfire, he had always been suffering pain and suffering. This year in the boundless cave was even more lonely and lonely. Most likely, Yen had not laughed to his heart's content for many years already, right? Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. The golden-eyed white tiger carried Yen and was currently running at full speed on a towering mountain. Crossing this mountain peak and walking another 100 miles forward, they would be able to return to the Sky Pillar sect. But right at this time, the golden-eyed white tiger suddenly seemed to have crashed into an invisible wall, being sent flying back with a bang. The golden-eyed white tiger rolled and fell into the mountain forest, smashing onto the ground with a loud bang. Yen was also thrown out, falling into the grass more than a dozen meters away. Ji Tianqing was immediately startled and hurriedly had Qianyu land on the mountain summit. After Qianyu landed, Ji Tianqing hurriedly jumped down and ran towards Yen with quick steps. By the time he rushed to the grass, Yen had already gotten up and was patting off the dust and grass on his body. "Yen, are you alright? Are you hurt?" Ji Tianqing sized up Yen with a face full of concern. Chapter 309. Yen waved his hand and squeezed out a smile on his little face. "Senior brother Tianqing, don't worry, I'm fine." Seeing that he was really not injured, Ji Tianqing was relieved. At this time, the golden-eyed white tiger also rushed out of the forest and ran to Yen's side and stopped. It circled Yen twice and let out a low growl, staring at the forest in front of it vigilantly. Seeing its reaction, Qianyu quickly explained to the two little white means that there is danger in the forest, and he asked you not to go near it. Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at the forest in front of him and observed with keen eyes. Previously, Qian Yu was flying in the sky with him, so he did not notice how little white and Yen were suddenly knocked away. At this time, he stared at the forest for a while and found a clue. Something is strange. There seems to be the aura of an array. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself as he walked into the forest. Qian Yu, Yen and the golden-eyed white tiger quickly followed and looked around vigilantly. Ji Tianqing entered the forest and came to the middle of two towering trees and stopped. Just now, the golden-eyed white tiger and Yen were knocked away here. The space between the two trees was empty and there seemed to be nothing unusual. But Ji Tianqing's face became dignified. He stretched out his palms and displayed his array skills, shooting out a ray of vital essence brilliance. The dazzling golden vital essence exploded in mid-air but strangely disappeared. Ji Tianqing kept waving his palms, making mysterious gestures and arcs with his hands, and his face became more and more dignified. About half a quarter of an hour later, a five-colored light wall about 5 meters wide and 3 meters high gradually appeared in front of him. There was no doubt that this was a wall formed by an array. Although this five-colored wall was condensed by the power of an array, it was incomparably thick and shining with dazzling five-colored brilliance, emitting a vast and mighty primordial chi fluctuation. It really is an array. And the array grade seems to be very high. Yen saw the clues, and his little face showed doubt and surprise. Ji Tianqing nodded and said solemnly, "That's right. This formation looks simple, it's just a five-colored light wall. In fact, it's a Tianyuan level formation. Furthermore, according to the various signs, this formation was just completed not long ago, probably 2 or 3 days ago. A heavenly origin grade formation." Yen was even more shocked and asked incredulously, "This place is only 100 miles away from our sect. Who would set up a heaven origin grade formation here?" Ji Tianqing frowned and observed for a moment. Then, he said in a low voice, "Don't be anxious. Once I break this formation, I will naturally know the answer." Ah! Yen opened her small mouth in surprise, looking at Ji Tianqing in amazement. "Senior brother Tianqing, you can actually crack a heaven origin grade array formation? Not only heaven origin stage experts can." Ji Tianqing patted her head and said with a smile, "Heaven origin grade array formations are also divided into 4 grades, extreme, upper, middle, and lower. There are also great differences in difficulty. This formation is just the most ordinary lower grade heaven origin grade array formation. Even an origin core stage array master can crack it. I, your senior brother, happen to be an array master too. I'll try my best." "Senior brother Tianqing, you're so young and you're actually an array master." Yen let out an incredulous cry, her eyes twinkling with little stars of envy and worship. Ji Tianqing just smiled and said nothing more. He began to crack the formation with all his might. His face was as calm as water. His eyes stared deeply at the five-colored light wall. Waving his palms, he constantly injected golden true essence into the five-colored light wall. The seemingly chaotic five-colored light wall, like a city wall, turned into countless lines and veins of the formation in his eyes. He cracked the veins of the formation like spinning silk from a cocoon, exploring the foundation and nodes of the formation, and soon made progress. Time passed quickly, and the forest was silent. Yen focused on watching Ji Tianqing crack the formation. Qian Yu and the golden-eyed white tiger looked around, guarding the two of them. 4 hours passed quickly. Ji Tianqing continued to crack the formation and consumed a lot of true essence. He was a little tired, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. After all, this was the first time he cracked a heaven origin grade array formation with his own hands. He couldn't help but think to himself, "It's just a lower grade heaven origin grade array formation. I have to use all my strength to crack it, and it will take me more than 4 hours. The supreme grade heaven origin grade array formation in the Dragon Mountain tomb is many times more powerful than this one. It seems that only when I have the strength of the origin core stage can I give it a try. Not long after, the lower grade heaven origin grade array formation was cracked. The 5-colored light wall quickly distorted and collapsed. Countless 5-colored light fragments condensed into an oval 5-colored light door. The light gate was filled with shadows, but Ji Tianqing could see that behind the gate was a passage set up by a formation. This was a teleportation door. Ji Tianqing observed a few times and couldn't help but frown as he muttered, looking at the direction of that formation passage, it seems to be heading towards our sect. Strange, who would go through so much trouble to build a heaven origin grade array formation here and set up a formation passage? He keenly sensed that there must be something strange in this. Yan also realized that something was wrong and said with a solemn expression, "Senior apprentice brother Tianqing, this matter is a little strange. Should we go in and take a look?" Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement without hesitation. The two of them stepped through the teleportation door and entered the formation passage. Qian Yu and the golden-eyed white tiger also hurriedly followed. The formation passage was formed by a 5-colored light wall. The space was a little narrow and could barely accommodate them. However, the formation passage had a very mysterious effect. The passage seemed to be only 100 steps away, but it could connect two places 100 miles apart. Ji Tianqing and Yan walked 100 steps in the formation passage and arrived at a teleportation door at the end of the passage. Swoosh! The two of them stepped through the teleportation door with Qian Yu and Little White and appeared in an empty cave out of thin air. This huge cave with a radius of 1,000 meters was inlaid with colorful gems on the ceiling and the surrounding rock walls. Thousands of gems were not only shining brightly but also exuding a vast and mighty primordial qi fluctuation. The primordial qi in the cave was very rich and the light was very bright. Ji Tianqing looked around and saw a huge formation in the middle of the cave. It was a circular altar with a radius of 100 meters. Countless formation patterns and symbols were engraved on the altar and inlaid with many spiritual stones and gems. Around the circular altar stood 9 huge golden dragon pillars. Each dragon pillar was terrifyingly huge, with a thickness of more than 8 meters and a height of more than 100 meters. The pillars were engraved with golden dragons bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. Ji Tianqing could clearly sense that each dragon pillar was exuding a majestic aura as heavy as a mountain. With a single glance, he could tell that the mysterious altar and the 9 enormous dragon pillars clearly formed a marvelous formation. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a person standing on the altar from the corner of his eye. It was a short and fat old man with white eyebrows wearing a yellow robe. He even had a goatee and a white beard. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.